Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 172. My name is NBZ and I exist. I'm here. I'm still alive. And so too is Bally, who joins me. How are you doing, Bally?
I'm doing well, NBZ. We've got a lot of games to talk about this time. I know we normally have quite a few games, but
that seems to be an increasing trend, I guess.
Yeah.
Just generally. And I don't know if that's because we're just constantly stuck indoors and we're just like, we just got to play everything and do everything, but
yeah,
it just continues to be the case, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these games are, I guess, shorter games, but as you said, we are stuck indoors and, you know, there's a lot of good games going on at the moment and we want to play them.
I might be able to go to your house soon, maybe.
Yeah,
we'll see what the
true.
laws happen, so that could be a cool thing, and maybe...
I think we're one phase away from that.
Yeah, we're one phase removed, so then we could play some Smash Brothers, because that ARMS character is hopefully going to get announced. Probably by the time this episode goes up, everyone will know who that is, but yeah, fun times. Cool, well, hello, we're here to talk about Nintendo and video games on this very show, this podcast, and yeah, we've got stuff to discuss. So, Bally, how about you tell the folks what we're going to discuss, and then we also have another announcement to do after the fact.
Yes, so for our first segment, we're going to be talking about the games that we have been playing. Second segment, we've got some emails. And then third segment is just a couple of news stories that we want to touch on, check in with. Yes, but as you said, we have our next Backlog Club announcement. So we put out a poll in last time's episode. It was between Metroid Prime, Federation Force, Nintendogs plus Cats, and Kirby Triple Deluxe. And our patrons voted, and they have decided that the next game we will be playing in our Backlog Club is Nintendogs plus Cats. So
by a landslide. It wasn't even close.
We put up the poll and MBZ's like, yeah, Triple Deluxe is going to win. Everyone's going to want that one. I was like, okay. MBZ's taking a claim.
I feel like we've put Triple Deluxe in like 4 polls and it never wins. So maybe that says more about Triple Deluxe than we would like to admit.
Don't challenge democracy, all right? If people want Triple Deluxe, they'll vote for it. So
yeah, we'll see. But yeah, with Nintendo plus Cats, I've already got my copy of Poodle, I guess. It's the Poodle one.
I've got my Golden Retriever is coming today in the post.
Okay, good.
Don't post Golden Retrievers, people. I didn't mean it like that, but yes.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a nice respite because, like, playing games like Last of Us Part 2 is like I could take some Nintendogs on the side, you know, like as a little respite. So yes, if you would like to play along with us, you can get it. It's pretty cheap on the eShop actually as well. Like you can download it digitally because it's part of the Nintendo Selects line. So it's like a half-price 3DS game. It's like $15, 15 quid. Or you could probably find a cheap copy online somewhere. But yes, we will be talking about Nintendogs plus Cats. We don't know what show we're going to talk about it on yet, but we'll nail down those details and we will let you know when you need to play it by, and then we will have a big discussion.
I think it might be one of those games where it very much depends on how much you're enjoying it with how much you play, because I think I certainly remember the first game being quite open-ended. Like there were certainly things you could do in the competitions, but if you weren't interested in them, like it was very much about just how much you wanted your dog to learn, or I guess. But
totally, because I remember you being heavy into all the competitions and getting gold medals in all of them. The only one that I went heavy in was the actual voice commands one, where my Dashend Cloud was able to win the gold medal at the highest level of voice competition, where you're telling him tricks to do and he does the tricks.
I was just getting, if you keep winning just like the frisbee and the like assault
obstacle course one or whatever it's called.
It was just like a really quick moneymaker, you know, and I could buy those nice treats and things. So
buy those Mario Karts, man. Love those Mario Karts.
Get them Mario Karts. Oh, that was a good time.
Well, we'll see if there's any of that fun stuff in Nintendogs plus Cats, but that will be in the future. So get playing Nintendogs plus Cats. I'm sure everyone could use some of that in their lives right now. So hope you guys enjoy as we will talk about that soon. But first, let's talk about other video games. Bally, you've been playing a lot. What's been taking your fancy recently?
Me and Caroline have been playing the co-op game Unravel 2 on Switch. So you messaged me and you were like, "Oh, Bally, this game's on sale." I was like, "All right, I'll buy it." And then it was like, There's like 4 or
Long
5
gone are the
quid.
days of Bally being like me messaging Bally like, here's a sale, and you being like, no, and we said I have my list. I need to go one by one down this list until I finish these games.
I mean, I still have my list. It's just
Yeah.
I am. It's a fairly flexible list. It's just a list of games I intend to play.
Yeah, you've mellowed out a bit more these days, I think, in terms of when you play, what you play. Also, it probably helps that it's a co-op game, right? Because that, more time for you guys to like just do co-op stuff together.
And having a strict list when you have Game Pass is just not a good combination. I think you got to have a bit of flexibility. So yeah, definitely wanted to jump on this one. Yeah, it's like if I think Yarny you played as in the first game, it wasn't co-op, it was just single player, and now
I think so, yeah.
You've got like 2 Yarnies, and they do all sorts of puzzle platforming together, and like it's some really impressive puzzles in there. Like I think that just the combination of one character standing on the ledge, the other hanging down, and then swinging in order to reach a ledge far away enough that a single Yarny wouldn't have been able to reach is just a really simple, and they repeat that mechanic a lot, but as simple as it sounds, it's very satisfying. It's very impressive. So you're working your way through sort of these 7 very long levels. Like each level must be like 40 minutes long roughly, or half an hour like there. And these levels are made up of like platforming areas, but also purely puzzling areas. So like there's some really interesting contraptions where you're pushing blocks and you can tie like your thread, your yarn to like multiple points, and then create tension in your kind of knots in order to move blocks using these platforms you're creating. And
is there like a limit to the amount of thread you can use? Because I've definitely seen puzzles where you're like pulling it over a thing so someone can land on, because I remember a puzzle where there's like electricity on the ground and one person drops down by a thread like swinging, and then they place a thread across so the other person can just land on the thread instead of falling into the electricity.
Right.
Like, does that can you get to the point where you unravel your character completely, or do they stop you well before that?
You're permanently attached to each other. You will. I should have said that. You're permanently attached to each other, but you can hold a button to hold tension. So you want to hold tension if your other character is going to do like a bungee jump off the side, like if you're not holding tension and they jump off the side, there's every chance they'll just pull you off. So like you can set the game to have like automatic mode where if someone does a bungee jump, the other character will automatically hold tension. But we did the mode where you manually do that just because it gives you a bit more freedom, basically. So often Caroline would like jump off a ledge without telling me. I'm like, right, I've seen her jump off, right, I need to hold tension. And then occasionally we'd be like, right, so I think one of us has to jump down, and then I'd go like 3, 2, 1, and we'd both jump, like essentially holding each other's rope and jumping off a cliff. And there's some really funny moments with that, and you definitely do have to coordinate and be like, right, one person is staying as the anchor, and the other is like Geronimoing off the side, So like, there's some really funny moments to do with that. And like as I was saying, like there's some really interesting contraptions where you're like using the thread almost as like to turn cogs and things, and machines and parts moving across the level, and one person's on one side, the other's on the other. And there's a lot of puzzles where there's like a white light on opposite sides of the screen, and the puzzle is to get both Yarnies standing in their white light at the same time. So essentially one Yarny will have to help the other up onto a ledge, and then they'll have to work out a way of flicking some switch or doing something in order for the other one to also reach the white light and then move on with the level. So it's very cool.
Yeah, and I mean, as a puzzle game, right, we know that you often come up against hurdles where you're like, I don't like this because it's too complicated. What is the difficulty level, and does it help that you're playing with Caroline, who maybe is able to help with some of those puzzles and figure things out together?
Yeah, I think 2 minds is definitely better than 1 for any puzzle game. I'll definitely say that. And I think we went to Google once in the whole game, which for me is a good level of difficulty. Like I think,
sounds like it.
I think with like, for example, the Gardens Between, I went to Google like once, for example. Like it's a similar number of times. It's when there's games where you're constantly popping back, or you're just stuck up against a brick wall, and I like it is very much fairly equal amounts of puzzling and platforming, which feels nice. And the game actually has a really nice victory lap ending, which is more platforming focused, and they basically give you a new power and the final level just feels completely different to the rest of the game. The setting is very unusual. It's photorealistic, but graphically it's not the best photorealism I've ever seen. Like, I think I would have...
Yeah, I mean, I've seen screenshots of the Switch version, and it doesn't look as, obviously, as sharp as the other versions out there. I guess it still was running okay, right? Like...
Exactly. I mean, if you're doing realism, it'd be nice to just have better resolution, better graphical fidelity, or go for a different art style. I think this game might have even excelled more going for a more interesting art style, but I actually think it still looks pretty good. What I've got more of an issue with is that there's this really strange story, and the story is told through these shadowy figures in the background, and it's basically like two kids escaping like a group of thugs, it seems like, and they're kind of running through different worlds, areas, factories, closing doors behind them, and that seems to be it. Like, I didn't really reach any resolution with that story. It's not like it was even clear what the story was trying to say, or just create, like, I think the game could have been just as good, if not better, just without that entirely. Like, this world you're in looks nice enough, and your two Yarny characters are just kind of methodically getting through the world. Like, I don't see the need to have these shadowy figures trying to tell another story. So, like, I don't know, it's strange. What else do I have to say? I think that it's really cool when, you know, big publishers like EA do smaller stuff like this, because I think it's very easy for the big publishers to only ever go for, you know, their Star Wars IP, Apex Legends, you know, Jedi Fallen Order, the sporty FIFA and Madden, that sort of thing. And they're like, the idea that, and it's a very small Swedish developer, I believe they are, it's like Coldwood Interactive, and this game just really feels like it has that indie charm, that, like, this is a smaller studio that it's a real passion project for these people, and hey, this game got a hell of a lot of marketing through a publisher like EA. I just think that's a really nice, healthy thing for the industry, for publishers like EA to pursue. So, like, I just think the game is a very strong game. I think as a co-op experience, for me and Caroline, nothing is beating Overcooked 2 and Overcooked at the moment. That's like the top echelon. But, you know, I think this might be the next one after those ones. I think, like, me and Caroline had a good time with something like Snipper Clips. I'd put this in a similar category, I think.
What about, like, Lovers in a Dangerous Space Time and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I liked that game a lot more than Caroline, but as, like, us jointly enjoying the game, I think this is higher.
Nice.
Yeah, it's only like 5-6 hours long. I think if you're wanting, you can play this single player. I didn't try it. I don't know how it works. I probably wouldn't recommend it. I think that it would be a lot for your brain to think about. I think it's easier to just play with two players.
Did you mention maybe that one player controls both of the Yarnies at the same time and then switches between them? Is that? I don't know if that's the case.
That's how I would guess it would work, but I've not tried, I'm afraid. Like, I think it... certainly on more of the action areas, I think that would be really tricky. And I should say, like, some of the ways it forces you to platform is, like, there's things chasing you, which I think is always fun. And just any platforming experience where there's a chase sequence, I've definitely had a good time with. So it's cool that this game goes for that aspect of platforming, but also the puzzling aspects. Like, it's a really good balance.
Now, here's the most important question, Bally. Does it commit the Nintendo sin of making you use Joy-Cons instead of full controllers for each person?
It does not. And I think that might be something aided by, like, the EA publishing side of things. No, it's the sort of thing where Nintendo would make it like that, but maybe a different publisher sees that as stupid, you know. So, like,
right, exactly, which it is, passively stupid.
Which it is. So I was on the Pro Controller. Caroline was just using my Joy-Cons in the Joy-Con grip, and that worked well. So nice. Much more comfortable for playing for long periods, for sure. So definitely would recommend it. Unravel 2. Don't know if it's on sale anymore, but maybe stick it on your Switch watch list. And it's the sort of game that'll definitely go on sale again. Would highly recommend.
Great.
Another game I've played. Caveat this one by saying I played this on Xbox Game Pass, and I hear the Switch version has had some issues, so maybe a touch of skepticism about this one. And that game is What Remains of Edith Finch. Similar to a game like Hellblade, I think the less you know about this game going in, the better. So just take everything I'm saying with a pinch of salt, maybe I'm not going to spoil anything, but like I said, the less you go in, the less you know going in, the better.
Right. We've got timestamps, so you can skip ahead if you need to.
Skip ahead and I won't spoil anything overtly. But What Remains of Edith Finch is a very short game, 2 hours. It's the story of you're playing as Edith Finch, and it's the story of her family, and the history of her family is told through the exploration of her house. And on paper it just seems like very obvious storytelling, but what's unique about this game is each person's backstory. So each person you find in her family and their backstory, because many of them are dead, is what happened to them, for example, you might open some book that you found in the house, and then it'll flash to either like a dream or a flashback or some other space entirely, and create almost like a mini game that tells you about that person through this mini game. And minigames may be the wrong word. It's just a different type of storytelling.
Yeah, I wouldn't say minigame. I would say like vignette, right? Like
vignette
it's kind
is
of
much better word.
Different vignettes with strange mechanics. Not strange mechanics, but like mechanics that are not first person walking through a house, right? So like there's one where you're swinging on a swing and you're like using a kite, and the kite is like going around the background, and there's a giant storm coming in, and the kite is like hitting into things, and you're like interrupting the environment as it goes. And so there's lots of different ways in which they talk about the strange history of this family and like how everyone died, and everyone dies in these weird different ways, which are then kind of complemented by the gameplay changing every time that you find one of these sections.
Exactly. And I watched sort of MinMax, who I follow. They did a show, a deepest dive, talking about this game. One of the guys on there mentioned it's got a very Lemony Snicket vibe, and like I thought that was a really good description of kind of the vibe. It's very the vibe you get from this game. Like it's quite a dark story. It's quite, but it's told through something. It's told through in a way that a younger person could identify with. It's not overtly gory or violent in that sense. But it's still, and it's not a horror game, but it suggests it's quite a dark setting, if that makes sense. And like the house itself is really interesting to just like walk around. So it's definitely it's not a dull walking simulator, is my point. Like it's very interactive, very interesting. Like seeing flags and ornaments and that represent all these people and their history, and having a story told. Because I should say, one thing, I love subtitles in games, generally speaking, and the first thing I did when I booted up this game was go to options and try and turn subtitles on, and there is no option, because the words and the appearing on screen and the way it's telling the story, you see all the words, and all the words are narrated to you, which I think is a really great combination. That's something generally I like in games. And the words almost like, rather than just appearing like subtitles at the bottom of the screen, they'll wrap themselves around specific areas to make your eye focus on parts of the house. And it's very immersive in that sense, where it's not just saying, oh, you should go here, and that you can naturally explore areas, but there's still a more linear path that the game is saying, hey, actually you need to look over there. And you can always, the game forces you to look in a direction, you can always look in another direction. So like you have this balance of knowing where you're meant to be going, but also what you would like to see. I've forgotten what my original point was going to be, but I just want to say I like that thing about the subtitles. We were talking off mic, just kind of like how Last of Us is very good, but is it actually doing something unique to video games? And we'd more or less agree that it's not, in the sense that that story can be told through an HBO series, for example, and hence,
exactly.
They're going for an HBO series. I think What Remains of Edith Finch would be a very, very difficult story to try and tell through another medium. I think there's ways of doing it, but I think that it would lose a lot of what it has playing it as a video game. And people often talk about like games that are really good to show someone who's a non-gamer to try and get them interested in the medium. And people often say Journey is like this game. And honestly, I think someone like my mum, for example, I think she would rebound off Journey in a heartbeat. I don't think she'd have any interest in that game. I think for her, she'd need something a lot more wordy, a lot more story-based. And I think this game would really do that for her. So I think at some point I'd love to try playing this with my mum and just be like, right, we're sitting down for 2 hours and you're going to play this game.
Right.
And obviously I think she would get stuck at points, but I don't think you necessarily need gamer brain programming like you would in a game like Journey, I would argue. I think this game definitely explains and leads you in a way that isn't necessarily purely linear, because I think there are ways that you can explore, and there's definitely parts of this game you can miss very easily. But I just think it does a really good job of not keeping the inputs too complicated and just keeping it all quite succinct in the way that it wants to tell the story it's telling.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about Journey, because I've had multiple experiences where I've tried to get people to play Journey and they just didn't connect with it at all. Like, so my sister, for example, she grew up playing some games with me, right? Like her favorite game is Soul Calibur 2. So like, I think she likes mechanical, like similar to me, like she thinks of video games as like you punch people, you hit people, you shoot people, right? And so she's not really, when I tried to get her to play Journey, she's like, this is boring, I'm just walking around a desert. Like she just didn't like, I feel like you have to have an appreciation for games, for Journey in that way.
I think my mum would find Journey boring as well.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you say your sister, like, she comes at more mechanics perspective, whereas my mum would want something very overtly story driven, which I think Edith Finch is more so. That's interesting, just because it's tricky, because it's funny because on MinMax, the guy I was talking about, I've forgotten his name, he was making the point that he feels this is kind of like a moment to rejoice for gamers, that this is the key that can prove to people that gaming is more than the stereotypes of, you know, people in their basement sort of thing. You know, this is the game that can really reach the mainstream of being like, hey, this is what video games are about. If you don't understand, try this game, sort of thing. Of which we all know there's a lot of people out there, and I'd be interested to test that theory out and maybe see online. I
feel like it might not connect with as many regular people, because there is like a magical surrealism to it, right? Like there is this almost high art element to Edith Finch that I think that regular person might, it depends on who they are, right? Whether they connect with that type of stuff or not.
I would aim this at someone who enjoys high art in another medium, I should say.
Sure.
So for example, my mum's very into like her poetry, arts, that kind of thing. That's part of the reason I think she would maybe enjoy this. Whereas you're right, someone who's just into maybe more mainstream things, I don't know, shows on Netflix or whatever, and you just said, oh yeah, this is what games are about, I can maybe appreciate that it might not have the same appeal.
Yeah. I do wonder, though, because, like, also another story with Journey is, like, there's some friends at uni, and I was showing them Journey because I had it on PS4 as a result of having bought it on PS3. It's one of those weird things that Sony did, where they actually did let you get your older games if they re-released them on the new system. And you know, these are the type of people who played GTA 5, they played Call of Duty, all this type of stuff, Battlefront, the new one from EA, stuff like that. And they just were like, this is boring. Like, they just didn't get it at all. And it is interesting that these types of games, like, we are more suited to them as people who understand games and are very into them and can see the interesting things that they do. But I think if you have less of a familiarity with games, it's I don't know. I think it's interesting because some of them tend to maybe not work for people. It's weird.
Yeah, I would definitely like to do a test. Maybe take 3 games. Maybe Edith Finch can be one of them, and just test these 3 games on different people, and we come back and talk about what works the best. Maybe
that sounds like a fun segment.
It sounds like it's not worked out the best.
You getting your mum to sit down and play Edith Finch, or at least like make her watch you as you control the character or whatever, if that's a bit tricky for her to do, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that's an interesting experiment that you can come back and report on at some point.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you say like she could watch it, and I'll admit Caroline watched me play this and she got a lot out of it, but it's that kind of brothers thing, you know, of like actually maybe the doing it is also an added thing that's so special about it. And
Yeah.
I don't know if my mom necessarily picked that up from, swinging the swing with 2 analog sticks, one leg being each analog stick, that sort of thing. Or the famous level with Lewis that I don't want to really overtly spoil here, but like
the fish level, yeah.
The fish level.
Yeah.
Let's call it the fish level. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how it would do, but I will definitely report back when and if I try that.
At some point in the future.
Yes, yeah. But I'd highly recommend Edith Finch. I think it's a fantastic game. It's one of those things that, without spoiling the game, it's one of those games that, in my view, doesn't have an overt resolution, and I actually still really appreciate it because we've talked numerous times about how much I'm a big fan of overt resolution, and I get a bit. And don't get me wrong, I still had my natural feeling when I don't reach a resolution of, what does this mean? And I have to interpret it, and it's like, it needs to be overt, robot malfunction kind of thing, and it's like, I didn't feel that for so long. I felt it very briefly, but then once I sat back and thought more about the game, I was like, actually, no, it didn't make a huge difference, and I actually really appreciated the stories this game was telling, and I liked that there are interpretations of numerous aspects of the game, and I came away with a really good feeling, as depressing as many of the stories in the game are or were.
Yeah.
Like, I think it really resonated with me. So yeah, would highly recommend playing this game as well.
Yeah, and so the Giant Sparrow who made this game, their first game, The Unfinished Swan, infamously on PlayStation 3 made me violently motion sick. So I have stayed away.
Or did you stop?
No, yeah, I never finished Unfinished Swan. It just ruined me.
Okay, is it 2 hours as well, or
I don't know? Yeah, probably maybe 3-ish. I'm not sure. I can't remember. It was a while ago, but I think they might have re-released that on PlayStation 4, so you may be able to check that out.
Apparently, there is a link between that game and this game.
There is, yes. There is, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so I was very trepidatious going into Edith Finch, and I was okay for the most part. Like, I think the interesting part about it is because you are walking through the house a lot of the time, but you're also equally spending as much time in those vignettes where the mechanics are totally different. To the point where it was kind of like a good break in between each walking section almost to stop that from causing me too much nausea.
Yeah, you can, that's one of the options, is you can set a reticle or not. So I put the reticle on just in case Caroline started feeling a bit ill watching me. But, and she had no issues.
Okay, cool.
We played it in 2 sittings, so yeah.
Great. Cool. Fantastic. So yeah, also Bally, we have both been playing The Last of Us Part 2, which only came out a couple of days ago. But early impressions is it's, hey man, you kill people and there are zombies and it's bleak, which I think a lot of the internet has been agreeing with. How have you found it so far, Bally?
I'm loving it so far. I'm maybe 3 to 4 hours in. I agree with you in your summation of it. But again, it's one of those things that, in my view, it's always more than the sum of its parts. And it's already hit me very hard. There's a lot of plot threads going on right now that I'm interested in, those where they go, those resolutions. But gameplay-wise, I think it is a real step up from the first game. Maybe not in terms of the infected fighting necessarily. I do think the infected are tougher. I am playing on normal rather than easy like I did with the first game, but I think the human-to-human combat in particular is incredibly impressive so far. A little bit more sandboxy, more options, and I'd say a bigger emphasis on stealth, but that's just me. Yeah,
and there feels like more threat in terms of when people shoot at you, Ellie just like careens onto her back on the floor. Like she goes over, and you really have to. I think the thing that has surprised me the most about it is, hey, this isn't Uncharted in terms of, hey, there's guys coming at you with endless waves and you have to shoot all your bullets at them and there's big damage sponges. It's far more like, boy, I only have a couple bullets here. I better make these fucking count because otherwise I'm shit out of luck.
Yeah, and it's more like, rather than waves of enemies, like you said, it's like, we're going to have 4 really intelligent enemies that know how to swarm you, group up on you, and, come at you from behind.
Communicate with each other, yeah.
Right, and it's interesting you say about Ellie getting shot back, because one mechanic, and I noticed this in the Joseph Anderson video I was watching about Last of Us Part 1, is that the very first shot that's always shot at you in Last of Us 1 will always miss you. It will always go over Joel's shoulder. And that's a way of alerting you to be like, you're under fire and you're about to get shot kind of thing. And I just don't think this game has that. Like, I think you take it in the chest and get knocked back, as you said. So
this is the interesting thing, because Naughty Dog have actually explained what their health system means in their games, right? Because theoretically in Uncharted, Nathan Drake gets shot a bunch and he takes damage and you see the blood like seeping in on the screen. But Naughty Dog, like, I guess this was either retconning or whatever, have said that when that stuff happens, that is like him getting more and more in danger, quote unquote. So he's never actually being hit by bullets when that stuff appears in Uncharted. It's more like, they're going past him and then eventually he will get shot by one and that one is the one that kills him. I guess it's kind of to get around the stuff in cutscenes where like, oh, someone gets shot in a cutscene and it's like mortally wounding, but Nathan Drake runs around and gets shots 100 times but is still somehow able to survive.
Yeah.
I would argue that probably the stuff with Ellie falling on her back is more like her getting the fuck out of the way of the bullet coming at her, potentially. I don't know.
Right.
Especially in a world like The Last of Us where it's more grounded, you would imagine they'd want to make that be the thing. Although it makes less sense because the way you heal yourself in Last of Us is like there's active healing as opposed to hiding around a corner and regenning your health. Like you're literally wrapping bandages around yourself, so maybe that's not the case.
Yeah, there's more pressure to do things cleanly. If you have like a messy encounter in Uncharted, it makes little to no difference. In Last of Us, it's all right, pain in the bum, making sure you got the materials to heal up again.
Yeah, like definitely messy encounters in Last of Us will leave you just with nothing left, right?
Yeah,
like because you're going to rely on using your gun a bunch, you're going to rely on healing yourself back up from taking stupid hits. It's definitely interesting. And it's weird because so many people have talked about dissonance, right? Ludonarrative dissonance, a phrase that everyone uses in the video game industry that I think has kind of fallen out of vogue to some degree, but the idea that Last of Us and the themes of it and the message of this game is like, hey, maybe revenge is bad, and like I haven't got to the point yet where they're like, hey, maybe you're going too far, and people have talked about how the game maybe tells you that violence is bad and then doesn't really say anything else about it and like kind of castigates the player for being complicit in the violence that they're enacting, and yet also having gameplay that is just inherently fun, right? Like the combat in Last of Us I found very enjoyable. I have been like, oh yeah, cool, like I shot that guy and blew this guy up, and like there is this weird way in which they are shaming the player whilst also creating a game that inherently makes violence incredibly satisfying and enjoyable, right? And I don't think I'll know how to feel about that until I get to the point where they start doing that a bit more. To me. So
no, I'm maybe like 3-4 hours in. I think you're about 11 hours in.
Yeah, close to that.
So by some people's estimations, you're about a third of the way through the game, and I've barely played a quarter. So,
right, yeah.
So like,
we'll see how that pans out.
A few people have said it's a very long game, so yeah, interested to see where it goes. But I'm very positive so far. I think mechanically, massive improvement on the first game so far, and plot-wise, as strong, if not. We'll see where that goes.
Totally. We were talking about this before we started recording, but the thing that has impressed me most about Last of Us, aside from the incredible performances and the nuance in the faces and the voice acting and all that stuff, which Naughty Dog are top tier at, like there's literally no one better than them at it, like the ropes and the breaking of glass, like the little ways in which you can actually interact with the environment and a little bit of environmental puzzle solving that's gone on. Like there has been some very satisfying moments for me of finding a way into an area by manipulating the environment and using it in a way that felt like doing stuff in Breath of the Wild to some extent. And it's weird because Naughty Dog games are not known for that. Naughty Dog games are known for funneling you down a linear path through a story for you to be delivered cutscenes, right? And this felt very different from that, and it feels like if Naughty Dog went down the route of trying something like Breath of the Wild, they could pull it off, and I would be very interested in it because there are the seeds being planted here, and it's definitely not the focus of the game, but some of that stuff has been very impressive to me so far.
Definitely. I mean, everyone goes back and forth in this debate, like, no, Naughty Dog should do another Last of Us, and they should do another Uncharted. And it's like, the only reason Last of Us exists is because they had a break from Uncharted. Like,
yeah.
But like, I would always be in favor of them trying another new thing rather than sequels.
God, I hope that they do something else. I hope it's not Last of Us Part 3. Like, please just... Like, I get it, people love this series, but...
I mean, I think there will be something else and then Last of Us Part 3. I do
maybe.
I think... nothing is a duology or whatever you would call it these days. Like,
right,
duopoly, duo?
Duology, I would say, is usually the term.
Everything's always a trilogy if it can possibly be, so we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Cool. So I also played. Way Forward sent a code over for the new Shantae game. This game actually launched on Apple Arcade last year, which, like, for a game like Shantae, that's like a side-scrolling platformer action game, I don't like. Obviously, you can play it with touchscreen buttons, but who the hell wants to do that, right? And you could connect a controller to it, whatever.
Not millennials.
Yeah,
Zers, I should say.
Zoomers. You mean all those? We're millennials. All those Zoomers out there playing on their phones. Which, fine, like, I'm sure, there are people who do that and people enjoy it. But for a game like Shantae, like, no, absolutely, I would wait for a console release for that. So they sent a Switch copy along, and I played through it. And this is my third Shantae game, I think, having played the one on 3DS, which is Pirate's Curse, I believe. And then I played Half Genie Hero on Switch a couple years ago. Half Genie Hero I generally tended to like more, and I went back and listened to myself talking about it. I think one of the reasons why Half Genie Hero stood out to me is that I think my biggest problem with Shantae games is that they do kind of pseudo-Metroid thing, and they don't tell you where to go, but it's in a way that is annoying because it's more about, like, finding a specific thing with an item and talking to a person, and them not being very clear about where that is and not putting a marker on your map and stuff like that. Whereas Half Genie Hero had a house in, like, the hub area where you'd go in and it'd tell you, oh, go here, do this. Like, it just was very straightforward about it and didn't, like, muck you around. And this game, like, goes back on that, which I really don't like. It is the most traditional Metroidvania Shantae game I've played, in the sense that it is one contiguous world. There's no, like, hub area like Half Genie Hero, and there's no, like, sectioned off Metroidvania islands like there were in the Pirate's Curse. It is one...
I really liked that in Pirate's Curse.
Yeah, it was cool, but I personally tend to prefer just one world, like a Super Metroid, right, where you just go around everywhere. And this is traditionally what I like, and ironically, it's probably the Shantae game I like the least. It does a lot of streamlining things. So the transformations this time, you don't have to spend a couple of seconds dancing to turn into a monkey so you can climb up a wall, right? Now, if you jump on a wall, you'll automatically turn into a little newt guy, and the newt guy will just dash his way all the way up. If you swim in water,
Are you saying nude or newt?
Newt, N-E-W-T.
Okay,
yes,
just
no,
checking.
no. Shantae doesn't just throw off all her clothes and jump into the water, because then they'd have to rate this game something different. Although, to be honest, with the cutscenes and the amount of women in scantily clad things in Shantae games is pretty high, so I wouldn't put it past Way Forward, to be honest. But that said, like, you turn into a little frog when you swim in the water. It's an automatic transformation. When you double jump, you'll turn into a squid when you do the jump, right? So basically, they are streamlining some of the movement abilities to make it much more streamlined in terms of traversing the world, which is good. I like that. But now it means that the dances are more used for puzzle solving. So there's one dance where you shake the ground and it does an earthquake, and it will, like, move boulders or move bits of the level out of your way so you can get past them. And there's areas where you have to use healing magic, which will heal you, but it will also maybe bring a flower back to life, and inside that flower there'll be an item that you need to use or whatever. So yeah, the dances have become more puzzle-based, whereas the transformations are much more instantaneous, and now you can kind of move around the level however you like. But ultimately, I think it comes down to, it's just another Shantae game, and there's nothing particularly special about it, right? The level design is pretty mundane. The story and the writing is, like, it's fine, but there's nothing interesting going on there. Overall, like, it just feels like another one. And I think Shantae has never been a series that is that interesting on its surface. Like, there's definitely cool ideas there. Like, I've enjoyed the music in the past. One of the other bummers is there's no Vert, there's no Jake Kaufman on this soundtrack, and so I could instantly tell the soundtrack was not something I was into. Like, it was fine, but it was very passable. Like, as soon as I started playing the other Shantae games, I was like, oh, first level, Jake Kaufman hits you with a fucking bang and you're off to the races. This game doesn't even have that. So it's like it feels really stripped of, I guess, identity and like anything super interesting going on. And yeah, as I said, like one of those frustrating things about Shantae is, hey, okay, I need this stone, and you're like, okay, you don't tell me where it is. I need to go and find a new area and look around there. Is this where I'm supposed to go? No, I'm supposed to go to this other place because I'm actually supposed to get this other thing for this other guy who will then give me the stone that I can then give to you. And this requires me to get this nuts and bolts, which then I have to talk to this guy who gives me another thing, which opens up a door, which then means I have to go to these windmills and use my electricity power up to turn the windmills on. And then the windmills will work and they'll blow away the sand, which finds the nuggets. Like it's just like this chain of things I have to do. And it's never really satisfying. A lot of it feels like busy work. But also, if I put the game down for like a day, which I did, like I put it down and picked it back up the next day, I don't have any marker on my map. There's no NPC I can talk to who I can't remember who I talked to recently. So I'm just like, what am I supposed to do? Like it
really is like Super Metroid.
yeah, to some degree, right. Yeah, Super Metroid has those flaws as well, but I would argue that like Metroid and game design has moved on since
I completely
then,
agree.
in some senses. And even when it hasn't, stuff like Hollow Knight, Hollow Knight has never been it was never about arbitrary finding of a thing to unlock area. Hollow Knight is open to the nth degree where you can kind of go around and fight stuff, but also Hollow Knight has incentive to do so because you're getting money that actually matters. There was a point at Shantae where I unlocked everything and money didn't matter anymore, and so exploration was completely meaningless. There's no XP I'm gaining for leveling up like a Castlevania game, so at some point it was just like, well, I'm just wasting my time, right? And it's weird because sometimes they do put a blinking marker on your map and are like, oh, go over here. And I'm like, oh, why can't you just do that for the whole of the game? A lot of it doesn't make sense. But yeah, ultimately, Half Genie Hero I found much more enticing. I think Half Genie Hero looks better. I think it sounds better. It's maybe a simpler game in terms of it's more level based than Metroid style. But honestly, like I kind of preferred it to this. So yeah, not super hot on Seven Sirens. Like it's very, very passable. If you know, it's one of those games where I don't mind. It's kind of like something to do with my hands, right? Like if I'm listening to a podcast on YouTube or I have a video podcast playing or a video essay playing on YouTube, I prefer like The Deepest Dive with Min-Max, for example. I prefer to do something while that plays in the background and not just sit and focus my whole attention on it, right? And Shantae is like, I guess the best I can say about it is it's something to do with my fingers to distract myself, half of my brain while So I guess not the most ringing of endorsements, but yeah. I mean, it's on Switch now. I think it's very overpriced. It's like 30 quid because this is the problem though. And I you know, people talk about price discrepancy a lot. Like Way Forward is a big studio, and yet, you know, there are studios like Team Cherry who are 2 people with Hollow Knight, or even Golf Story with 2 people, and they can afford to set their game, or even Eric Barone with Stardew Valley, they can afford to make their game 10 quid because there's only a couple of people working on the game. Whereas when you have to pay an entire studio, man, they have to make that money back. But it is weird when you take a look at a lot of these things and they're not comparable in terms of quality and length and all these other metrics. But
yeah. And then like you compare it to the fact it's on Apple Arcade, which is how much a month at the moment?
I think £5 a month, yeah.
Right, so it's just like me as someone who's not played. I mean, I don't want to play it with virtual D-pad, obviously, but like that is a very big jump in like price. That just and we've talked about pricing in games. We're in a very strange place right now where we're sort of getting the worst and best of both worlds at the moment, and I feel like in 5 years that will probably be quite different.
Yeah, everything will change. Talking about capitalism, let's talk about Night in the Woods.
The time has come for MBZ to play Night in the Woods.
Yeah.
I've been waiting so long for this moment.
Yeah, so, man, I think that this game hasn't ever had a better time to come out, probably, or be played or whatever. Like when it came out in 2017, right?
Yes, 2017. I played it in 2018.
Okay. Yeah, because it feels like it was ahead of its time in some senses, right? Like, I feel like the discourse on billionaires and, like, eating the rich has only been, like, the last year or so, I would say. Like, maybe late 2018 through 2019, the discourse of, like, hey, billionaires fucking suck, let's throw them all away and tax them to high hell and shit like that.
I definitely think people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have risen massively in you know, fame is wrong, but popularity, people are more aware of her. I think that all happened sort of second half of 2018, even though she was elected before that, and that was in line with like the Netflix documentary about her and just all the kick-ass things she says on Twitter that go viral.
Yeah, for sure.
This game definitely was maybe a little bit before that.
Yeah, I think it was slightly before that, and and certainly I'm sure there was a lot of things going on there, but I guess I wasn't paying attention to it as much as I have been in the last 2 years.
But it's also very like, it's very Brexit, it's very Trump's America. It's very the way that small towns have evolved,
right,
and the issues that rise from that in relation to a 2008 crash. Like, I think it's playing more on those. It's playing on all these themes. It's not more on one than the other, but it was definitely referencing a lot of those things, I guess, more so at the time, that have just kind of eaten their own tail through stuff like the election of Trump and the effects of COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter movement. Like, these things have just kind of almost fallen in line with what this game's been saying.
Yeah, definitely. And so I find it very prescient for those reasons, right? It definitely it's talking about all this stuff, like across the board. So what, like, at its core, what is Night in the Woods? Well, it's kind of like a 2D platformer where you play as a cute animal, right? Like, which is a weird thing to say given what we've just discussed. But like, the framing for Night in the Woods is that you play as May, who has come home from college for unknown reasons, is back home with her parents, and is back in her old town where a lot of her friends still live and work now. And the game is very much likes the idea, or is gets you familiar with the idea of mundanity, right? The everyday kind of waking up, the same animation every day you wake up, the same animation every day you go to bed. It's kind of almost giving you this cycle. Yeah, sure, yeah, to some degree, but like far less positive and like optimistic than Stardew Valley, I guess. Stardew Valley supposes a world in which, let's go and live in this idyllic town where we do farm work every day and it's happy and great. And that's not really the case here, right? Because a lot of the town's infrastructure has broken down. It is very much like the jobs that people have and the stuff that people are doing is, they almost feel locked in a cycle. Like Bee in particular, so she has a friend called Bee who's like a crocodile, and she has a situation where her mother passed away from cancer and her dad is mentally unstable, and he owned this business, and she has basically been forced to be running this store every day because as a result of the medical bills from her mother passing away, they were destitute, they lost their house, and they have to she's basically just going to work every day and doing this, and kind of trapped in this cycle, which I find is like probably the case for so many Americans, right? Like it especially with the medical stuff, right? Which is a thing that was very foreign to us in the UK, of not having to, worry about paying, especially when you lose somebody and yet you still have to pay the medical. Like, it is just, for me, that is just disgusting. Like, I cannot abide by it, and I don't understand how America functions in that way. It is just, it's not actually eye-opening because I've known about it for a while, but it is just baffling almost, and that people can be put into these situations, and yet you also have these others who exist in the world who are just exploiting all this labor, and that is just, I think one of my favorite characters is Selma's. Selma's is this little bear who sits on the steps going up the hill, like when you're about to go up the hill to the town, and you talk to her every day, and she has like these fun little poems for you, and like her poems are like one of them is like, I got mad one time, it was online. That was the poem. I'm like in that very short amount of time, you're saying something quite biting, quite funny, but also very, very true. And there's this moment where you go to the library, and you're kind of, there's like this supernatural story that happens on the, well, I guess it's kind of the main thrust of the narrative in some senses, but I would argue that the supernatural story is kind of a framing for the more interesting issues that the game touches upon and talks about. I'm not that interested in the resolution to the whatever that is. I haven't finished the game at this point. Like, I'm close to the end.
The resolution's decent, by the way, and it does play into its own themes, but
sure, yeah, I'm sure it does. At the moment, I'm kind of like, we're chasing ghosts, whatever. That's not really what I'm interested in here. But you go to the library to kind of research like ghost stories, and then you come down, and Selma's is there, and she's part of this poetry society, and these other poets like say they're rubbish poems, and then she's like, all right, and you're expecting something similar to what she's done, which is like very pithy, very short, very kind of sharp and biting, and then she just said, so I'm going to read out this entire poem because I think it's just very good. So it's called "There's No Reception in Possum Springs." No reception here. I wave my black phone in the air like a flare, like a prayer, but no reception. I read on the internet, baby face boy, billionaire, phone app sold, made more money in one day than my family over 100 generations, more than my whole world ever has, where house buying jobs become rent paying job, become living with family jobs. Boy billionaires. Money is access to politicians waiting for us to die, lead in our water, alcohol and painkillers. Replace my job with an app, replace my dreams of a house and a yard with a couch in the basement. The future is yours. Forced 24/7 entrepreneurs. I just want a paycheck in my own life. I'm on the couch in the basement, they're in the house in the yard. Some night I will catch bugs out to the west coast and burn their Silicon City to the ground. And like moments like that happen when you don't expect them, and they just feel like punches, just complete out of like, because the game frames itself as this kind of cutesy art style, and like there's a real lightheartedness to it amongst a lot of the more difficult stuff that it's grappling with. When it really goes in like that and punches hard, I think it just lands so strongly, because like that entire screed is just the entire politics of America right now, right? Like it represents everything that is happening, and I think it is just so incredibly good at getting that across. And sure, maybe it's critiquing without solution necessarily, right? And I don't know where it goes, whether it supposes some kind of solution or even revolution. And you know, there's also, you go to a party with B and she's talking with people and they're talking about punching fascists, and I'm like, absolutely, like the discourse is punch fascists. So yeah, it's interesting, and I don't know how you feel that it lands that stuff, but for me so far, it's just come at it very, very hard.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely took everything that you've already said from it. There's one thread I'd like to cover, which I don't think you've mentioned yet, is that Possum Springs is a former mining town, and
absolutely,
they all worked in the mines traditionally, and you get a sense of the tradition through like the library, and I think there's a monument somewhere about, and it references like trade unions and some of the power and status that some of the workers previously had, and I think these are things that mirror a lot to like British culture and our former mining towns, and it obviously plays a lot into like our Brexit discourse and things. And I think that's just one other area that, like, politics on the side, I think a huge reason that the left is struggling, especially in like Europe in comparison to previous generations, is like lack of trade unions. So workers who formerly worked in places like shipyards and mines now work in call centers and supermarkets, and like these industries by their nature just aren't unionized in the same way as they were back then. And I think this game also talks about some trade union people. I'm trying to remember what it says about them. There's a couple of like iconic heroes I believe they reference that are like former trade union leaders, that this town is now completely like lacking. And I think that's just one more thread that plays into this wider reason as to why Possum Springs is the way that it is, and how people feel their status has just massively changed through but mainly external factors.
100%. I think a lot of that stuff is stuff that you will get the more you put into the game. It really is, because ultimately every day you wake up, you do the same thing. You go into town, you explore town, and you talk to one of your friends who you end up hanging out with or doing something with that evening, and that's more like its own vignette kind of deal that you go and you go to another place, like you go to the mall with B and you like steal from a store, and like there's a fun mini game where a lot of the stuff that happens outside of you just side scroll platforming around the place is you see a little paw, like you have May's paw, and you use it to like grab things or like move things around, and it's a nice little mechanical way of differentiating some of that stuff. So you like try to steal some records from the store and then you get away with it, and then you come back and you're like, this person's going to get in trouble because like they aren't the system. The system's going to punish this poor worker just because someone stole something, and it's going to fall on that person, even though you're trying to actually punish, you know, the people at the top, but they're not actually going to feel any kind of significant loss from this, and the only person who's going to get hurt in the equation is the actual person working the store. So like there's a lot of stuff like that the game goes over, especially when you are exploring those smaller stories, right? Like there's this ongoing narrative with this guy Bruce, who's a homeless guy who is, it seems like, had alcohol issues and like is just near the church, and you have this church lady, the pastor, who is trying to get away to like use the church to house homeless people and to help them out and things like that. And then you have this kind of group of 4 village council people who are clearly like the upper middle class of the town, and they're like, oh yes, but we decide what's right for the town, and oh yes, this situation, yes. And you can clearly tell that they're like above it all, and they are very much like, oh yes, but we don't want to, you know, stink out the church with this homeless guy. And it's just like, these are the people who fucking suck, right? Like they're the people who are in charge of things and kind of trying to sort something out with this town, but clearly everything is going to shit and they're not really solving any problems. And yeah, you don't really, like, that's a story that like slowly progresses. You like get tiny bits and pieces of it every day as you go by, and if you don't engage with it, then you don't really get that. So I think the game definitely encourages you to go around and talk to everybody and kind of exhaust the options almost. And to some degree, I can feel like that can itself get mundane if you keep like going to the same places again and again. But that is the point that the game is trying to hammer home to some degree, right? So like the gameplay is story in that sense. And yeah, I mean, the other thing that I want to talk about is that in this game that's essentially a walking simulator, like the traditional, it's basically just story being told to you, it has a triple jump and it feels good, right? Like, and for me, like, that's a thing that has actually made the game even more enjoyable, is that like it's mechanically sound, which is so weird to say, because that's not...
They know their market. They know that there's going to be people who are very into the 2D platformers who might play this game.
Yeah.
You know, I think they...
But I don't know, because I think they could have gotten away with it without having that stuff. And
totally,
I think the game is stronger for having it, because it does instill that sense of like rebellion that May has. May definitely, you don't really know what has happened with her, and I still don't know the full story yet. Like, there are things you can surmise from what gets said, but she definitely is a rebellious type, and the ways in which you jump up onto the phone lines and you're just, you know, walking along the phone lines and you go off to the train tracks, and a lot of that stuff is built in, like, walking on roofs. It's built around the fact that you can physically do that with your triple jump, and you can rebel of your own volition, right? But
it's like the makers of the game want you to at least try to talk to as many people as possible, but they've created, in a 2D setting, they've created quite a verticality to the town. So I guess that triple jump also is just kind of encouraging you to speak to more people and experience more of Possum Springs. And
definitely.
There's multiple readings of it, but that may be one.
Totally. And isn't that great that you can have a game where the triple jump has a reading to it, right? Like,
right.
It's this game is excellent. It is very, very good, and I am thoroughly enjoying it. I was going to try and finish it yesterday, but I was like, you know what, man? No, like I'm going to take my time with it, because otherwise I would just be going to try and finish it, to try and get to the end almost. But like, that's not the point of this game, right? It's a pouring examination of the state of current modern capitalism, right? And what it does to people, and how people feel about it, and things like that, and how it affects real people as opposed to the people in power. So yeah, it's biting. It's very good.
One of the designers of Night in the Woods, who I follow on Twitter, I can't remember their name, but
it's at Bombs Fall, isn't it? He's been a guest on Beastcast before. I can't remember his name, but yes.
So I guess he's like part of Infinite Fall, the developer, and they sort of announced they're working on another game. So
yes, they did.
The art style from that one image they shared on Twitter looks similar to this game, but that's not to say they probably might go in a completely different direction. But
totally.
I'm pretty confident that's going to also be a fairly political game, so I'm excited to see
for sure.
where they go. And yeah, I'm just really glad you finally played this game, Emizel. I'm glad that you played it in a moment where Black Lives Matter protests were in full force, and then the fundraising
Itch.io
fundraising bundle, and this game was part of that bundle that is speaking to, like, talking about these issues. I think that's very powerful, the way it's all sort of come together, and that this is the time that you played it. Like, I think that worked out
Totally.
nicely.
I mean, yeah, like it made sense for the developers to put this in that bundle, right? Like,
Totally.
absolutely did. So yeah, I'm close to the end, I think. So I'll finish it soon. But yeah, there's for me, when we're talking about a game saying something with its story and like being meaningful with it, so far this is definitely like ahead of what Last of Us is doing, and I think I'll see what Last of Us's eventual message is. But yeah, I think this definitely.
I can barely think of like a political message coming out of Last of Us, like part 1 or part 2 so far. Like it's just I don't know. I we can discuss that another time.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Yeah. I got a lot more out of the story of this game, like as you say.
Totally. Great. Well, that is, I believe, going to close us out for the first segment. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after this break reading some of your emails.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the second segment of today's show. We have some emails lined up, but if you would like to send in an email, please write into ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. You can also post a comment in our Discord server, link to that in the description, and on our Twitter account. It's a fun community in there. You can post some questions, have a chat to some pals. It's good going. So our first email this week is from Rock, who's from the internet. Hi all, I've just been listening to your discussion of Ori and have been hearing a lot about Metroidvania games, but I've thus far been too scared to buy any in case I find the difficulty too punishing. So what are your favourites, and are there any you could recommend that aren't really hard? I hear Hollow Knight is brilliant, but it sounds like too much for me. Thanks for all that you do, Rock.
Thanks, Rock. It's a good question to ask because, we are very big fans, me in particular, of the Metroidvania genre, the oeuvre, if you will. And I think you are right in saying that Hollow Knight might sound too much for you. It's kind of like recommending Wheel of Time as your first fantasy book. It's like, no, don't start there. Just start somewhere a bit more digestible and easy. Hollow Knight is definitely a very, very difficult game, and one that I don't think it really has like options for you to make it easier, right? It's more in the Souls style where there's no difficulty select. It's just kind of one thing, and you can't really. There's no accessibility options for Hollow Knight in terms of that stuff, is there?
Yeah, and like I'd actually define Metroidvanias as having the ability to be different in two specific areas. I think one of those is navigation, and the other is just kind of enemy encounters, boss encounters. And I think a game like Hollow Knight is actually incredibly challenging in both areas.
Right.
Whereas I think there's other games that we can talk about that are maybe more challenging in one area but not the other. Whereas Hollow Knight just feels very brutal in terms of navigation, not knowing where to go, finding maps, but also some of those enemy encounters are just really, really brutal.
Exactly. And that is one of the things that sets it apart. And I think why people love it so much is because it is challenging, right? Like, people love hard games these days. It's definitely as a result of Souls, like, it's coming to vogue, and so it makes sense that people scream from the rooftops about how much they love Hollow Knight. But if you're not looking for a challenging experience, then it's not going to be there for you. Of course, unless you start playing some Metroidvanias, you're like, actually, I really like this genre. Maybe I should go and check it out because I have heard how people love it. And it is great. So
cool. Well, shall I recommend some more like linear Metroidvanias? Because like I don't know if I have a preference between like the more linear ones and the less linear ones, but I can certainly appreciate how smooth and fast flowing a lot of the more linear ones can be. So I think games like Metroid Fusion is quite linear. A game like Gato Roboto, Ori and the Blind Forest, the original, is fairly linear. I also think like Guacamelee is very linear. I think Guacamelee is probably a really good example where the actual Metroidvania parts, in terms of the navigation, are fairly simple. Like it's very linear, but then it's got like these cool kind of melee combat encounters where you're kind of fighting through like a beat 'em up kind of hordes of enemies, and then some of the bosses can be a bit tricky. I know that we went back on the show ages ago, MZ, and you made the point that like they've definitely made the game easier for that Switch version when I played it on Wii U, didn't I?
If they didn't make it easier, I will feel embarrassed at myself, basically, because it took me, oh boy, that Jaguar, man, that motherfucker.
So I'd probably go like Guacamelee. I think that's an easier game than Ori or Fusion or...
I don't know. And also the other thing you have to talk about is platforming difficulty, because Ori and Guacamelee certainly have their fair share of challenging platforming sequences. Yeah. So obviously, there's 3 levels of difficulty, right? It's like the platforming, the combat, and the navigational aspect.
Yes.
Hollow Knight doesn't really focus on platforming. There are certainly sections of it that are very platforming based, but I don't think it really excels in that arena. Where
I think Hollow Knight focuses quite a lot on in comparison. I think there's only a handful of games that are more platforming focused than Hollow Knight, like an Ori or a Guacamelee.
When I say platforming, I think along the lines of challenges with the platforming. Hollow Knight doesn't really challenge you with its platforming for the most part. There's definitely areas like
there's a handful of areas, but I think also I played like the extended edition.
There's an area like the Den of something. I remember there's a really hard like sequence that you have to go through without dying in Hollow Knight, which I never attempted. But for the most part, Hollow Knight is like, okay, jump up to a ledge, jump up to another ledge. The challenge doesn't come from the platforming for the most part in that game. Whereas Ori is all about your jumping places and your moving places, and both of those games, the first one and its sequel, are, you could argue, some of the most challenging platformers out there in some senses. But it also depends, Rock, on what your difficulty, what you define as difficult, right? Because I would say a game like, Bayonetta or Devil May Cry on a hard difficulty is way more difficult for me than a platformer on a hard difficulty, because I'm just better at one thing than I am at the other. Ori I've never found to be hard necessarily. I'm just good at those types of games, so I don't find them punishing or difficult. But again, your mileage will vary depending. So I think it's good to have different options available, because certainly in the first game, the combat of the first Ori is very minimal, and it never really asks you to shoot stuff at big bosses. Like, the bosses are platforming for the most part, versus the second game where there are far more actual bosses that you use weapons against and you have to take down their health bar and that type of thing. So they both provide different sides of the experience for sure.
I actually think if you just want to like have a taster, I think going for like a much shorter Metroidvania like a Gato Roboto, which is literally about 2 hours long maybe, is a really good just taster of... It's a very linear one. Yes, there are bosses, there's a bit of platforming, but it's also on the easier side just in terms of the I died a bit, I think, but like it's not too difficult.
A little bit, but I don't recall it being like this brutalistic thing in any
not
way.
At all. So I'd definitely try that, and then if you think Gato Roboto was like great and you enjoyed that and you want a game that maybe opens up a bit more, then another like one which I think is like a good first example of where you need to know navigation a bit better is something like an Axiom Verge, where I think that navigationally it's easier than a Hollow Knight or like a Super Metroid, but it still takes elements from those and it's got some challenging combat, less emphasis on platforming, I'd say. And yeah, so I think Axiom Verge just brings together some of those elements quite nicely as like an upgrade from something like a Gato Roboto.
It's interesting. I actually find Axiom Verge to be one of the more challenging Metroidvanias I've played. Certainly in terms of some of the boss fights near the end and the combat surrounding it. It definitely, for me, I found really tricky, but I think it does a good job of like checkpointing you and giving you good save points and things like that. So it's never really overly punishing in the way that a Hollow Knight is, right? Like Hollow Knight, there are certainly bosses like the ghost guy who slams you in the ground and shit like that. Ooh, there's a good like 3-minute section of area you have to go through every time you die on him just to get back to him, which is another part of the kind of punishment that Hollow Knight deals out to you is that stuff. So I would say if you want a Metroidvania that feels modern, that is really easy, that is very short, that is easy to get into, and you have access to it, which depends on what you own, the best recommendation I have is Metroid Zero Mission. Metroid Zero Mission is probably the easiest Metroid game. It looks fantastic still as a GBA game. It is really fast and frenetic. It is linear while at the same time giving you the room to explore somewhat. It shows you like a point in the map that you need to go to, but doesn't spell it out like Fusion does. Even though in many cases Fusion like doesn't exactly tell you what to do. Zero Mission, I think, strikes the best balance, and you can get it on Wii U Virtual Console, but otherwise it's harder to get a hold of. This is why we need GBA on Switch, man. Like, we just need those games on there because it would be so much easier to recommend Zero Mission. Like, I would recommend Zero Mission to almost anybody who's interested in getting into Metroidvanias, just because it is so accessible and easy. And
it's on the short side as well. I think it's like maybe 6 hours, I want to say.
I mean, even less than that, probably 4 to 5, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, Gato Roboto, and then if you like that, Zero Mission.
Yeah, if you have access to Zero Mission, definitely seek that out.
What about an easy Metroidvania after Gato Roboto that's easier to access?
I really like Ritual of the Night, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. It is definitely more challenging than Gato Roboto, but I would say after you get past Zangetsu is like an early boss who is challenging to the point where I think I died on him like 10 plus times. That is really the only difficulty spike I experienced in the game, though, because from there I started to like find all these crazy weapons, ridiculous combos that you can do, and tore my way through the rest of that game. It was so much fun to just like shred bosses. So Bloodstained certainly starts out a bit more challenging, but then it gets a lot easier as you go on with it. And I think as a next step from Gato Roboto, I would actually recommend Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. It's excellent. It's one of the best games that's come out in the last few years. So
cool.
Yeah. It's very good.
Well, hopefully that's a few Metroidvanias to give a whirl, Rock, and let us know what you try first and how it goes.
Gato Roboto is on the Switch eShop, by the way, and so is Bloodstained as well.
Bloodstained.
Yeah.
Our next question is from Trevor C, who's from the internet. I'm a big fan of the podcast, and I'd like to say thanks for making my days at work a lot shorter. While I love just about every episode of the podcast, my favorite are the backlog clubs, and in general, when you guys talk about retro games. So out of curiosity, what's your favorite era of Nintendo? For me, it's the GameCube and Game Boy Advance era. Like I said, you have the greatest home console of all time, as well as the second best home console, the Super Nintendo, getting many great ports to the GBA.
Thanks, Trevor. I find this one really tricky, right? Because there's certain points in time where you have a bit of crossover. Like, the 3DS came out, but the Wii was on its dying legs. You have the DS being in the mix alongside GameCube and GBA, right? Like, there's definitely... You could pick a moment where there's this kind of crossroads between generations.
And there's, like, nostalgia, and it's difficult to... detach. And
sure.
There's a lot of games we've played retrospectively of an era, Do they count for that era?
Yeah, I don't know. However you want to interpret it, I guess. It's tricky. I would say probably, weirdly, my favorite era of Nintendo is 3DS and Wii U. Like,
I'm actually probably the same if we're not talking about maybe present day.
Yeah. And I think it's because I have a much broader understanding of everything that was coming out during that period of time. I played most of what was coming out during that period of time, partially because it was very slim pickings for the most part, right? But also because I think it was finally the era where old Nintendo games became the most accessible to people like us in terms of having save states, in terms of, you know, having a variety of different consoles covered with most of the big things available if you wanted to get access to them. You know, obviously it helped that the 3DS launched terribly, and so we got the Ambassador games on there. It helped that the Wii U was floundering, and so they would just like throw the kitchen sink at it, man.
Have a free Pikmin 3.
Yeah, have Pikmin 3 for free, have all these other things, like here's Metroid Prime Trilogy half price off as soon as it launches, the day it launches on Wii U. You know, there was a fire sale kind of mentality at Nintendo that made, they did the Humble Bundle, for God's sake. They've never done one since, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think in terms of quality of games that I enjoyed playing, just getting into the deep cuts and talking about some weird stuff is definitely up there, because back then the media wasn't really covering Nintendo, right? Like, they didn't care about Nintendo until they came back with the Switch, and that's the thing that had gone on for a while, I guess, during the Wii era as well. But also it felt like as a podcast, as we were talking about Nintendo, there were very few people out there doing the same thing and caring in the same way. So I think that's probably why it's an era that I think very fondly on.
Yeah, I'm more or less the same, to be very boring, but that sort of 2011 to 2015 era, I'd say, with the 3DS, with the Wii U, was playing a lot of 3DS games when they came out, was playing a lot of Wii U games when they came out. On top of that, like you said, the Wii U Virtual Console was fantastic. It still is fantastic, with Game Boy Advance games, Super Nintendo games, and so on. Obviously had the Ambassador program on 3DS, and on top of that, it was like starting a Nintendo podcast in 2013. Like, that was right in the middle of that era where I was playing more games more consistently, and playing, because of the access to all these virtual consoles and games in the Ambassador program, I was playing Nintendo games from like lots of different eras in that one time frame. And it was just really nice to talk about a variety of new games and old games and talk about those on the show. And I think that the period before that, the sort of Game Boy Advance GameCube era, at the time, there were very few games I'd look back and say, actually, that's a really great game that holds up. And a lot of the good games I like from that era, I played much later, like Metroid Prime, for example. Like, there were a few games I just missed out at the time where I was so obsessed by a game like Wind Waker or Double Dash. And after that, the quality of GameCube games I was playing at that point in time kind of dwindles after a bit. So I think that's kind of what I grew up with, and then more so going into the show, that Wii U 3DS era. And I think while the Wii U, we've talked about it many times, but while the Wii U was just a commercial flop, I think for a Nintendo fan who had big gaps in their knowledge in terms of classic Nintendo games, it was a really great system. And I still rate a handful of Wii U games as some of like my favorite games of all time, like Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, Pikmin 3. I think that Wind Waker HD remake is fantastic. Like, there's just some really great innovative games as well, like, and Mario Maker launching on that system, Splatoon launching on that system. Like, this, it's just a really great system generally, and it's kind of the devolution before the Switch with that whole, you know, tablet mentality. I don't think the Switch exists in the same way it does without that Wii U. As much of the Wii U was a big flop, I just think that it was really important. It was something I really appreciated. And yeah, I must admit the current era for Nintendo we're maybe going to look back on even more fondly, but because we're kind of still in it, I think it's maybe hard to say.
I don't know, right? For me, part of the reason that era was so cool is that nobody else cared, right? So it felt like this exclusive...
We were hipsters.
It felt like this exclusive club where I'm like,
yeah,
you know, no one knows anything about Nintendo, but I do, you know, because I'm an idiot who bought the Wii U and the 3DS, so I'm just going to be a nerd about it, right?
You bought a Wii U on launch.
I did, yeah, launch day. Opened it.
Trying to.
Trying to, hell, man, talk about a great Wii U version of a game, trying to, like, using the touchscreen to make the boxes as the wizard. I'll tell you what, no other console could do that. Could they? No, they couldn't. You had to use boring analog sticks.
Nintendo Land is still one of my favorite multiplayer experiences of all time.
Oh, yeah.
When you get 5 players on the Luigi's Mansion or like Mario Chase, that is some awesome fun.
It's quality. It's high quality stuff. Of course, it's very rare that you ever get to do that. Thankfully, we on multiple occasions were able to pull it off. But
imagine bringing that to Switch and having an online mode, you know.
Yeah, there is something about the experience of being in the same room as people. I definitely understand that.
Oh, it was hilarious, yeah.
But
watching
you're right.
Our friend Charlie, I specifically remember being the ghost.
He was a demon ghost.
He just got such a kick out of sneaking up on us and getting us with the ghost. And he was just absolutely loving it. He must have won like 6 games in a row or something. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, he was ridiculous. We were like, Jesus, no one could escape him.
He was loving it.
Yeah, so yeah, obviously a lot of fond memories associated with that era, but also like there is a selfishness to it in terms of, hey man, no one else cared about Nintendo. We cared, and we got through that together. And like, it's kind of like, you know, it's one of those things that I think made Podcast Beyond popular back in the day. Is like the PS3 was on the shits, like no one cared about it,
right?
And
it was
like
niche.
There's that smaller hardcore group of people who are just there for the hard times.
Yeah.
And I would argue that like now the current IGN Podcast Beyond is just far more boring because everyone likes PlayStation, which I would also argue about Switch. Is like the discourse on Switch is boring because everyone likes Switch, and so there's no you have fewer of those hardcore enthusiasts who really go deep on the platform like you did back in the day.
As much as it's cool that everyone talked about Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild, I agree. It does feel very, well, now we're one of everyone talking about it, whereas where were you guys when Pikmin 3 came out? You know? Like,
motherfuckers. Where were you when Rayman Legends got delayed by Ubisoft to come out on other platforms, motherfucker?
Or like the original Splatoon, you know, like these were big staples that came out and then we covered on the show when very few other outlets that weren't like, you know, Nintendo focused really talked about them in a meaningful way. Maybe Splatoon's an exception. I think a lot of people appreciate that game, but I agree. It's a weird feeling, and Nintendo has gone back mainstream again, but you know that's not going to last forever, and that we'll be here when we have to go into the hipster side rooms again, you know.
Yeah, like I don't know. It is a little stupid to think of it that way, but I don't know. You know, I like that. It's weird. I don't know how else to express it aside from that, but we made it. We're still alive. And hey, look, Switch is still great. I love the Switch. It's just
Switch is fantastic.
It's not quite as good as the Wii U, man. It doesn't have an internet browser, right? Like, talk about the greatest YouTube player of all time is the Wii U. Nothing comes close.
I mean, I think it's very easy and should be uncontroversial to say that there are significant aspects of the Switch where the Wii U is just so much better.
Oh,
and one
for sure.
of those is Nintendo's library and access to it. So, like,
that old library, your classics, you mean?
Pardon?
You mean the classics, right? Not the
classics,
library of first-party titles, because I think probably quite roundly now, having put most of those Wii U games on Switch, the Switch's first-party crushes Wii U.
That as well. Yeah. If you talk about Nintendo Switch exclusives versus Wii U exclusives, I mean, because of Breath of the Wild and Odyssey, I'd probably still go Switch.
Yeah.
But I think as an overall package, Wii U still has like a better diversity than Switch currently has, as much as I think Switch is going to overtake that in the next couple of years.
Of course, yeah.
But yeah. Our final email this week is from Masterclaw, who says, Reggie showing off his custom-made Iwata amiibo got me thinking, if you could have one custom amiibo for any person or character, who would it be, and what would it do in-game?
I think this was, I don't know how long ago this email was, but
this was a while ago.
Man,
but
Reggie doesn't work at Nintendo anymore. It hasn't for a while.
I mean, I think we got the question long after Nintendo. Reggie had left Nintendo.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, Bally, if you could have one amiibo for any person or character, who would it be? What would it do?
Okay, so my boring answer, and I don't think this amiibo exists, but I think a model exists of this, is Toon Link in the King of Red Lions.
Okay.
Like, it's just, that's my most sort of nostalgic character. I think it's one of those games that, from a nostalgic perspective, just got me into Zelda, and I love Wind Waker. Everyone knows this, and it's just, I just think the design of King of Red Lions is also very cool. He also plays a huge role in the plot of that game. I think it represents a lot of what I love about that game. So, and this, obviously the sailing, which is a huge aspect of that game that I'm a big fan of. So my boring answer would be King of Red Lions. What would he do in game? Well, I've been advocating King of Red Lions should be in Smash Brothers for a long time now.
Just as a character. Just a boat that just like flops along on the stage.
If you can have a piranha plant in a pot, you can have a damn boat on the Great Sea. Like, come on. Right. Like, it is doable. So yeah, King of Red Lions for me. What would it do in other games? I guess in like Mario Maker, you can platform as King of Red Lions. That's cool, right? Jumping around as a boat.
Well, they took that shit out, man. Like, that was only the Wii U version that they allowed Amiibo costumes. Yeah.
So. Another reason that Mario Maker 1 is better than 2. Yep. For sure. And then, hey, I think King of Red Lions could be like one of those crazy moves in Bayonetta 2 or something,
Yeah,
where,
sure, yeah. Like, it's one of her weapons. She just bangs out the King of Red Lions and uses it to smack people.
Also, just stick... You don't even need wheels, to be honest. I think get King of Red Lions in Mario Kart. Like, come on.
Oh, yeah, that's a good call.
If we're going to go for this smashification of Mario Kart, then Toon Link 100% has to be riding the King of Red Lions. Like, there's just no question about it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I think that game should have multiple links, a bit like Smash Brothers. And yeah, Toon Link, he's got to be in King of Red Lions.
Okay, so that's your boring answer. Do you have an exciting answer, or should I go?
Oh, I'll need to think about that while you give your
Okay,
answer.
I don't do boring answers. My answer is very simple, and I know exactly what it does. My answer is I would like a custom amiibo of Mace Windu. And what he does in game is you just get a purple lightsaber. Breath of the Wild, Link has a purple lightsaber. Mario Odyssey, Mario has a purple lightsaber. Whatever game you put him on, you just get a purple lightsaber. It's very simple. Mace Windu is a very cool character who I like a lot. We just recently watched episode 2. He cuts off Jango Fett's head. Spoilers for Star Wars, but I mean, come the fuck on. Mace Windu, he's a cool motherfucker, right? Like, Samuel L. Jackson just told George Lucas that he wanted a purple lightsaber. He got a purple lightsaber. What is more badass than a purple lightsaber? The answer is nothing. Yeah, so think of any game and just, that character gets a purple lightsaber, man. That's my answer. So,
I think it's a bit tragic that Shovel Knight seems to be the only indie character who has one.
Yeah.
I'd probably go with someone like Madeline. She deserves a damn amiibo.
Yeah, for sure.
Like,
yeah.
Celeste is an incredible game. And I think any game that you swipe the Madeline amiibo, you get her extra double jump.
Okay.
Like, where her hair changes colors. So
I was going to say, like, any game that you swipe it on, you just get infinite accessibility options.
You just... That's such a good one, yeah.
I mean, you shouldn't lock that shit behind an amiibo, but like...
Yeah, I know.
I can see Nintendo doing that,
So I'm playing Last of Us 2 part now. I can't... it's not accessible. I'll scan my Madeline amiibo into my
Also,
PlayStation
scanning your
4.
Madeline amiibo to get a double jump in Last of Us Part 2 would be hilarious. That would be pretty great.
Exactly.
I mean, I would take Ellie wielding a purple lightsaber. I'll do that.
Imagine a lightsaber in Last of Us. That's just ridiculous. Oh, so good.
Yep. So I don't know. I can't, like, I just thought of Mace Windu and I was like, yeah, there's no other answer, is there really? Like, that's the amiibo that should be made.
Do you know, have you heard the story about why he has a purple lightsaber?
I think I just said, didn't he just ask George Lucas?
Oh, right. Did you say that? Yeah. He just asked him. It's wild.
Yeah. I mean, he's Samuel L. Jackson, man. He can get whatever the fuck he wants.
I know, but when you hear other people speaking about Lucas and his view on that universe, he's very specific about no, that can't happen because of this reason, that reason, or oh yeah, but probably not because I want this actually to happen.
Yeah.
So for him to just be like, yeah, you can have a purple lightsaber seems really outside of Lucas's whole ethos on that world.
Yeah, I think he was just like, I mean, it's Samuel L. Jackson, man. I'll just do what this guy says, right? Like, I'm glad that he's in my movie in the first place.
That's also true.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Are there any other characters, like any outside of video games, that you'd want to be an amiibo? Like, I don't know. I'm not that into amiibo is the thing. Like, I'm not. having a custom made one would be cool. Like if I had a custom version of like myself as an amiibo, that would be neat, I guess, or my me. But I don't know. I've never been that into like the custom amiibo thing, or whatever. They just don't. The thing is that Nintendo just have abandoned amiibo, right? Like there's no consistency with them anymore. There's no real reason to use them. There's nothing in games that has applicability that is interesting.
It was a fad. Yeah, it was totally a fad, and like I guess it was started by Disney Infinity, right? And then kind of everyone jumped on it.
Well, it was started by Skylanders, then jumped on by Disney, then jumped on by a bunch of other companies.
Yeah.
You know.
So like everything else, Nintendo was slow to the party on this issue. So yeah.
But I mean, the one thing Nintendo has over all those other things is because they're Nintendo characters, they have this inherent lost ability that, not to say that Disney characters don't, but the amiibo,
they don't as much in a video game setting.
Sure, the amiibo exist far more as collectibles rather than objects for use in game content. Because they can be used across a bunch of different stuff. It's just nobody does because there's not much worth it.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Yeah.
So cool.
Well, anyway, thanks very much for your question, Masterclaw. That was a good one. And that's all the time we have for emails this week. But as I said, if you would like to send an email, please send it to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We always appreciate more emails. It's a fun part of the show. But that's all we got time for. Join us after the break for part 3.
All right, folks, welcome back to the third and final part of the show, wherein we're going to be talking about some announcements that happened. There was a Pokemon presentation that happened where they announced some stuff, and I was like, I'm not going to watch that. These tend to be boring, and they focus on rubbish. And then they announced fucking another Pokemon Snap game. So that was the thing, yeah, we've got some other little things to talk about from Guerilla Collective, and EA did the EA Play event, so there's some Switch stuff there, so a few things to chat about in terms of news. It's a weird time, Bally, right? Like, how do you feel at the moment without E3, with all these little small, like, stream events going on? There was another one called, like, the Future of Games event. There was the PC Gamer show that happened. Like, there's a lot of these more sparse, spread out things that are being announced.
Yeah.
It's a little different this year.
It's one of those things where I think I'm not adverse to change. It's just that I think change takes getting used to, and
it takes time to refine it as well, right?
And it takes time to refine and make it better. And I just don't think I'm used to it yet. So say this kept going for the next 2-3 years, I think, yeah, I'd get used to it. I'd get into the rhythm. I'd be more used to kind of random, and it feels a bit more random. I might prefer it if there was a bit more structure, but personally, I'm at the moment really missing the sort of 3 days of here's the timetable, here's what you need to stay up for, and this is what you can watch reactions to, and see feedback on. I'm missing that, but I'm not adverse to change. It's almost like, when like a podcast has a new co-host, and at first it feels really different, you're not so sure, and then a year later you're like, I love that person. They had a really interesting dynamic to that podcast that was very different to before. I think it's just about getting used to change, and I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah, have you been watching much of the stuff that's been going on surrounding? Like, I didn't watch. I think I watched the Future of Games event with Easy Allies as they reacted to it. I didn't watch the PC Gamer one. No. I watched most of Guerilla Collective day one, and then kind of fell off the other 2 days. I think day one was the main one where they announced a bunch of things.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, I'm more or less checking into what I would check in with E3. So like Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, Ubisoft, EA. I didn't do PC gaming show either. I watched the first Guerilla Collective, most of the second, but not the third. So yeah, I'm just sort of dipping in where I have the energy and interest to do it. And it's one of those things where if there are really awesome games being announced in trailers, they will kind of sift their way to the top. And like I have enough people I follow on Twitter where I trust that they will do the long hours of digging up these games for me to check out the trailers, and I'm alert.
Yeah, there was that. It was a while ago now, but there was that Wholesome Direct that also happened.
That was
which
very
pretty
good.
Neat.
Yeah, that was neat. I liked that.
And that had a lot of stuff coming to Switch in there too. So
yeah, that was definitely a lot more Switch focused, I felt, than perhaps some of the other stuff. But so picking up what I can where I can, but I'm not systematically going through the whole thing. Perhaps.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, let's talk about the Pokemon thing then, because as both of us kind of realized, you messaged me and you were like, Pokemon Snap, and I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, oh shit, I was supposed to watch that Pokemon thing. I think I was playing Last of Us, and I was like just in the middle of playing a video. I wasn't playing Night in the Woods or something. I was like not focusing on the news or Twitter, and I was like, what are you talking about, Bally? And I was like, oh fuck, did they really drop that during this Pokemon presentation that, by all accounts, everything else in it was pretty boring? I mean, okay, let's talk about Pokemon Smile really quick though, because that was a fun little thing. I really liked the advert that they made for it with like the little kids, and then being like, no, I'm not going to brush my teeth, and they're like, oh yeah, I can be Pikachu, let's brush my teeth. That was very cute. I enjoyed that.
I mean, that would have made me brush my teeth when I was that age. Like,
of course it would. Yeah,
like gamifying little things like that when you just do not want to do them as a child, I think has a valuable place in our society. So well done,
for sure,
Pokemon Company.
Yeah, you know what? As an adult, I might just download that for fun, just to see what it is, right? Like,
yes. When's it out? Is it already out?
It's already out. You can download it for free on the App Store on Google Play. So check it out. And then they also they talked a bit more about the DLC. The DLC is out now. I haven't got it because I've got too much other stuff to play at the moment. I might check in with it like at the end of the year when the second pack comes out, maybe when it goes down in price. Maybe we'll see how that shakes out. But from all accounts, that's just like a bigger wild area that seems a bit more well designed in terms of its levels and things like that. So yeah, that was more of an advert. But surprisingly, like in the middle of this, as opposed to like opening with it or closing with it, which is what you would expect from a big announcement like this. Maybe the Pokemon Company don't view it as a big announcement. I'm not sure, but new Pokemon. Trust Nintendo.
I'm going to stop you right there, MBZ. I'm going to stop you right there.
Okay, all right.
It's new, and it's new, not new. And think about it, right? Mew is a Pokemon. Is Mew called Moo or Mew?
Bally, okay, this is the problem with me talking to Americans for half of my life now on the internet.
Just answer this question. Why isn't Mew called Moo? That's what I want to know.
Because that's not how you say it.
So it's new, not new.
It is new, yes. I'm sorry that I've been Americanized and radicalized by all fucking Nick.
To draw that line in the sand before we moved on any further.
See, the thing is, Bally, I don't even realize I'm doing it.
I know, that's
how
why
bad
I'm calling
it
it out.
Thanks for calling it out, but like, I'm sorry that my cadence and my vocabulary has been Americanized by every American I've talked to over Skype and the internet for the last decade of my life, probably more at this point. So yes, new Pokemon Snap got announced. Of course, Nintendo, the company obsessed with the word new for some reason, but new Super Mario Brothers, new Luigi U, it's all just their entire existence is branded around the new Nintendo 3DS, for God's sake. Well, I've heard, I think James Jones on RFN has talked about how Japan as a culture, or they just like that word for some reason.
Japan, English, so the two languages that are very cool in Japan are French and English. Like, these are very cool languages. So you get t-shirts and things that just say random English words, and they're not used for the meaning of the word. They're used because using English is cool. Like it, and I just think that it's just a broad mistranslation of the word new, and it's in terms of its usage, and it's more about the brand than the meaning.
Very true. Yeah, that probably makes sense, but I still dislike it strongly.
Yeah.
Like, if they're going to do it in Japan, fine. When they bring it over here, please, like, localize it properly.
It's very much Japan executives who probably don't speak a ton of English thinking that it's the right way forward, you know? Like,
sure, yeah. Not realizing that, like, the original New Super Mario Brothers is very much not new at all anymore.
Especially fourth time round.
Exactly. So anyway, enough castigating Nintendo and Game Freak over, or Pokemon Company over bad naming practices. Bally, you are very excited by this, I'm sure, because you're a huge fan of the original Pokemon Snap.
It has been 20 years. It's so incredible when these announcements that people have Pokemon Snap was in there amongst, you know, F-Zero, Wave Race, Advance Wars. It's just these games that you don't think they're... And it's actually older than all of those in terms of games coming back. And it's really refreshing to see it. We are now like, how many? 6 more generations down the line since the first game. I have huge nostalgia for this game. It was the first game I ever picked up on a home console on my N64. I got a second-hand N64 roughly more or less the time that Pokemon Snap came out, which I think was in the year 2000, maybe 99 or 01. I'd need to check that. But yeah,
it was peak Pokemon Fever time, essentially.
Pokemon Fever. I absolutely loved this game. It's got a lot of replayability. I think the characterization of Oak and just like him reacting to, like, he's got a pre-recorded phrase he says where it'll be like, nice shot, and when you're going back through your pictures that you select for him to rate, and it's just a really unique game mechanic, and it's a really, at the time, other than Pokemon Stadium, it was the only like 3D realized world of Pokemon, which was very cool and I appreciated hugely, and I am very excited from what we've seen. I like that the format doesn't look very different. It literally just looks like a shinier version of the same game, and that's totally what I'm up for, because there are so many new Pokemon, new environments, but keeping that linear track that your vehicle moves down. Take pictures, pick the best pictures, show them to Oak. I'm sure we'll see some more features of the game, but I don't want them going too far from that core path that the first game I think got just right.
So you don't think this is a remake of any sort? It looks like a brand new game to you, right?
I mean, there is a beach area like the first game. There is a forest area like the first game, but I'm pretty convinced it's a very different beach area and a different forest area. And
obviously all the Pokemon will be different, or at least they are going to be putting a bunch of new Pokemon in there at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll be nods. I think we've already seen Pikachu in a very similar position. So Pikachu was like in every single level in the previous game, and there's like multiple different. You can shoot like Articuno riding Pikachu riding Articuno, Balloon Pikachu, surfing
Pikachu, yeah,
Pikachu eating an apple, like Pikachu using Thunderbolt. Like there's a million different Pikachus you could get in the first game. I think it'll do that again. Likewise, I think some famous Pokemon from the first game might come back. So Gyarados coming out the waterfall or something. I imagine they'll probably just dip into the nostalgia a bit on a couple of those from the first 151, I should say, because the final level of the first game was based around Mew. I'm sure Mew might come back, and yeah, I'm just excited to see all these other generations of Pokemon, and I think more areas would be good. The diversity of areas in the first game was very good, so improving that is like not a big deal. I think it's going to be great. It's going to be diverse, and you only want it to be like a 6 to 7 hour game really to beat every level and try and get a picture of every Pokemon. And yeah, making it challenging. I think that you had like Pestables and Apples and the Poké Flute in the first game. I think those are aspects they'll probably mix up, and you might see some new items. And yeah, do we think this game's coming out this year, like end of this year?
I don't know. They kind of said under construction at the end was the sign that they put up, which I don't know what that means, like what stage it's in.
I mean, there's not normally a big lead time between Pokemon games getting announced and them coming out, right? They don't dangle the carrot for years on end. It's more or less, here it is, and it's coming out end of this year. So
sure.
I guess they're not confident for the end of this year. Otherwise, they would have just said now, because that's
probably just as a result of the situation of the world. That makes a lot of sense.
And likewise, maybe they don't want it clashing with a potentially Let's Go Johto or what phase are we on now? Diamond and Pearl remakes. Like, there's always
Gen
a chance
4 remakes.
One of those is coming at the end of this year. So we'll see. I'm very excited, and I think it's one of those things where it doesn't look as good as it could look, but it still looks so much better than the first game, obviously. And you know what? It
looks a lot better than anything Game Freak has done in recent memory
that's
as
also
well.
True, and I don't need it to look any better than it looks, honestly. It's hitting all the right notes for me, and I couldn't be happier.
That's great. Yeah, I'm excited to pick it up and try it, because I remember you bought me Pokemon Snap for a birthday present when you could gift games.
And you just ignored it to this day.
On the Wii. Back then you could gift games on the Wii. You can't even do that today on Switch. Nintendo, what are you doing with yourselves? But yeah, I did play some of it on the Wii Virtual Console.
Oh, you did?
And I remember, I think I sent you a picture of a Zapdos or a Moltres at one point in time through the Wii message board. But yeah, I never got that deep into it.
Did you have any early impressions?
I enjoyed it, I guess. I don't know. I didn't play it enough to really get a good understanding of what made Pokemon Snap special. My overriding memory of it was just being at your house watching you play Pokemon Snap for the most part, and being like, there's this one that you couldn't get and you were very obsessed with getting it, and then
you're like, can we play Pokemon Stadium now?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, come on, man, let's put all our Pokemon into Stadium and watch them fight, because that's fun.
And look at our
for the most part. Yeah, totally. So that's great. Like, I think it is one of those mythical games almost of like, are they ever going to return to Pokemon Snap? Turns out, finally they decided. What reason? Who the hell knows? Nintendo and Game Freak and...
I think Switch might be the reason, you know? Like, this might have been a vague idea for a long time.
Duh, Bally! The Wii U was the perfect system for Pokemon Snap, for fuck's sake! Like,
not in terms of sales. That's why.
No.
Commercially,
no, I know.
I agree with you.
Oh, it's so infuriating. It's literally like a camera you can turn around an environment. Like, oh my goodness Christ. Nintendo and Pokemon and everything to do with that.
I think this gives me hope for, wave races and F-Zeros, If you're gonna...
Does it though?
Because if you're gonna reboot, you might as well reboot on a very successful system with a huge install base. That is.
So what you're telling me is that new F-Zero is going to be announced for 2021.
It is happening. Well, I'm still not. I wouldn't rule out them rolling F-Zero and Mario Kart into some sort of conglomerate. To be honest, that's my new theory going. I think Smash Brothers, F-Zero, and Mario Kart in one game. I wouldn't rule that out.
I think they're basically like halfway there already.
Exactly,
so.
With the upgrades of Deluxe and Mario Kart 8, so who knows?
Yeah. Cool. I'm looking forward to it. I don't know if it will come out this year, but it would be nice because Nintendo's lineup otherwise is pretty thin still. Paper Mario coming down the line, but yeah, we need a bit more. And the other big announcement was, which will be exciting because now Bally and I don't have to feel guilty about talking about Apex Legends on this podcast, is that it's coming to Switch, baby. EA Play announced a cool thing about Apex is that they're finally doing crossplay. I don't think they mentioned cross progression, which I don't know how they'd figure that out anyway, because I've got like a bunch of different unlocks on PS4 compared to PC, and like how they would like merge my account, maybe, I don't know, but at least cross play is now possible, which means that I could play on PC, you could play on Switch, I could play on PS4, you could play on Switch, I could play on Switch, you could play on PS4, and it would all work across the board, incredible. Which is just a nice thing. And I'm really interested to see what Respawn can do with the Switch hardware, because they've never done a Nintendo game before. It is the type of game that ordinarily doesn't run particularly well on a system like Switch, but who knows? It has to be at least 30 frames per second. It has to work like Fortnite does, right? Where you can play with other people, but it will put you in a pool mainly of Switch players if you're playing on that system, for the most part.
I think what's most shocking is that EA just has this horrendous relationship with Nintendo, and that... Oh, yeah, garbage. But they were like, okay, no, the Switch has sold so many that we want crossplay. And they're probably sorting out crossplay between the other four sort of systems, and thought, we should probably, like, from a market perspective, we should really be on Switch. And, it's been obviously made by the decision made by some executive and whatever, but it's promising, and I'm very curious to see what it will look like. Because
for sure.
Like, frame rate is very important to first-person shooters, and we know how powerful the Switch is. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm not personally tied at all to. If my account can't move over, I don't care about skins and stuff that much, or my level. Like, if I can still play as my favorite legend and shoot up some Switch using noobs, then like I'm up for that. I don't mind if I lose all my snake skin outfit for Bloodhound or something.
I mean, I got a lot of nice Loba outfits, so it would be a bit disappointing, but
Yeah, you do have a right nice...
It is ultimately stupid because you never see them when you play the game, and yet people get obsessed with them. I don't understand it, even me, and I don't get it, man. Why? Like, why do our brains work this way? It's really, really silly. But the other thing EA Play announced was that they're bringing 7 titles to Switch, and they didn't really say any of them. They were like, oh trust us, 7 games are coming. And we're like, well, what games? Because Burnout Paradise just recently came out on Switch, which is a infamous, very, very popular game in the Burnout series. Probably
PlayStation 3 era.
Yeah, it was 360. And famously, Jeff Gerstmann played this in his interim between getting fired from GameSpot and starting Giant Bomb. I think he argues that Burnout Paradise is the best game of that generation for him personally. So yeah, people love Burnout Paradise, and you played Burnout.
I played Burnout 2 Point of Impact, and I absolutely loved it at the time. It's one of those things where, as I'm continuing this journey, learning about driving games and arcade versus simulation, I think Burnout's a good example of maybe a game that's a little bit too arcadey for me. I don't like the emphasis on crashing. So again, it's where Forza, I think, gets the balance right. Are
you interested in picking it up on Switch, the remaster? Because I think I heard Blessing on Kind of Funny talk about it. That's a very good version of that game.
Maybe. I mean, there's just a lot of driving games I still need to try out and play, and I'm kind of more interested in picking up Forza Horizon 3 in Australia, because I think that's a really cool game. It's actually really hard to find a cheap version of that. So it's like 30 quid, which I guess is cheaper, but versus Game Pass, it's not that cheap. But yeah, and I think there's going to be a Forza game later this year as well. So I'm kind of become a Forza fanboy, and I don't mean that anything against Burnout, but that's kind of where my driving views are right now.
Sure, yeah, no problem. And then I don't know what else they would bring. I mean, my prediction is that they're going to do the Mass Effect trilogy remastered, and they're going to put that on Switch, which would be...
Does that count as 3 games or 1?
Yeah. Oh boy, you're really stretching the definition, EA here, but probably like in EA's mantra, they're like 7 games coming to Switch. What it actually means is like 2 collections of trilogies of some kind, and it's like, oh dear. Well, yeah, we'll see. But I feel like that is gonna happen now, right? Like, that feels very inevitable that Mass Effect remasters will be put out on current gen and next gen, and also be put on Switch. That would be a smart thing to do. And then there was like other games that were shown here and there at the other things. I don't know if you have any in particular that you wanted to highlight, Bally, but
I don't know the name of it, but you'll be able to help me. It's the one. Okay. It's the RPG where you're playing as like a couple on this strange-looking planet, and you skate around.
Yes, it's called Haven. Haven is made by The Game Bakers, which is a great studio name. Back to our email a few weeks ago.
That's a name. Oh my god.
Yeah, I would shout out to The Game Bakers. What a great studio.
The best.
And they made Fury. Do you remember Fury, Bally? It's a kind of top-down action game where you do boss fights. It's basically a boss rush game, and it had a great style to it. I was always interested in it back in the day. It's kind of this mix of like character action alongside bullet hell. Like, a lot of the bosses throw a lot of like shit out at you that you have to dodge and get in between, and like use your sword, and then there's this kind of parry mechanic when you're getting close to the boss. Anyway, Fury was a very cool game a couple of years back, and I've been meaning to check it out. But this is their follow-up called Haven, which is very different in tone, still keeps the similar art style, but has, I I really like the vibes, the music as well. Like it feels like a very chill kind of narrative game that has turn-based RPG combat in it that seems like you're cooperating with the two characters at once. Very, very promising stuff. Like I'm very excited by it, and it was shown off a while ago, but it's being reintroduced now, and hopefully that comes out soon. I don't know when that will be. Probably next year, I would imagine. And then the other one that I picked up or picked out that was interesting to me was the only one I went and wishlisted on Steam, which we were talking about this, and I don't know how wishlisting on Steam helps developers. Maybe it's just it pushes them up in the rankings on Steam. Maybe it's that having it on your wish list will remind you with an email when it goes on sale. Like
maybe they've done a study that it's proven that if you have a game on your wish list, you're more likely to actually pick it up versus forget about it.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. And so the one that I did was Gestalt, Steam and Cinder, I think it might be called. Maybe got that backwards, but Gestalt. And I picked this one out because I had seen GIFs floating around Twitter of the animation of the main character, like wielding a weapon, and like the strobe effect that comes off the weapon when you wield it. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, I recognize this. And it's like, hey, it's a pixel art Metroidvania that has a almost Indiana Jones vibe with like the hat and stuff. And definitely up my street. Like very, very cool looking. The type of thing that I would be very interested in picking up day one on Switch, which likely it will come out on because those types of games perform very well on Nintendo's platform. So yeah, Gestalt was the other one, but yeah, there's so many. Like I think this becomes the problem with this type of event is that there are 100,000 indie games happening all at once in the world, and it's literally impossible to keep track of them all. And what you really hope for with these types of presentations is that there's one or two that speak to you, and those are the ones you go after. And you hope that people will find that one or two amongst all of them.
And it seems like Guerilla Collective definitely have just made the decision rather than do one presentation with the best of the best. They've just sort of said, well, everyone can be included, and we'll just do 3 long presentations. And I get why they want to do that for like the politics of keeping everyone on side, and all this. But as the viewer, it is quite difficult to remember kind of standouts and actually sit through all of it,
Yeah, really, it shows you how tough it is to market games when the sea is just so flooded. Like it's just completely crowded with options and things, and stuff will come on sale and go to Game Pass and go to all these services and Humble. And
it's where if you're an indie, if you can get inside, say, a Nintendo presentation, a Sony presentation, or an EA presentation, it makes a really big difference to like just the number of eyes on it and getting sorting out through all the clutter,
Right, would I have remembered Bugsnax as clearly had it been a shorter 30-second trailer in a Guerilla Collective?
Yeah.
Very unlikely,
it just won
right?
the internet.
Yeah, pretty much. It destroyed. But Bugsnax it feels like a game that could come to Switch. Seems like it's a timed Sony exclusive, right? But that could come to the platform. And that other one, Goodbye Volcano High with the sad dinosaurs, absolutely as well.
Looks very good.
A lot of these that Sony were throwing up on their screen were like, hey, these are kind of limited timed exclusives. They'll probably go elsewhere. And to be honest, Nintendo have their fair share of that at the moment. Most indies will do an exclusive couple of months with Nintendo before they go to the other platforms because that's where they'll sell the best for the most part. So yeah, I think that covers most things. Anything else, Bally, you wanted to pick up at all?
Just that maybe it's a little surprising, and I know Nintendo haven't done a direct, and it's rumored they might do one, they might not do one. It's maybe surprising that they didn't just do their own sort of indie collective show at this point in time this summer. I know they've done a couple much earlier in the year, but that's the sort of thing where us as Switch owners, Nintendo fans, we tune in for. And Nintendo could handpick what they think are some of the interesting indies to pick out. But there you go.
Yeah, I'm curious if it's been enough time yet for them to have, gotten further in projects where they maybe work with more indies with their own IP, like they did with Cadence of Hyrule. Like, is that a one-off? Are they doing more of that? I would like to hear.
I think if we see one, it probably will be one, but one is still awesome. If they do like one a year like that, that's pretty cool. I mean, Cadence of Hyrule was fantastic, fairly recently, so
yeah, it was recent enough to where it makes it a bit trickier, but potentially later on this year when they do have one, because I think the rumors were like they were going to do one in maybe August or something, but it got delayed massively because of everything going on. So Cool. Yeah, that's probably going to close us out. The ARMS presentation is happening, so I might just insert here. We might record a bonus bit about Smash Brothers ARMS character. So if that happens and we do it, here it is. So the Super Smash Brothers presentation just happened, and we just watched it. So here's this little bonus extra thing thrown into the podcast. They revealed that the ARMS character coming to Smash Brothers is in fact Min Min. Min Min, the ramen lady, she literally has a ramen bowl as her hat, and I think ramen noodles are her hair, and then also I think her arms are made out of ramen as well. Yeah, it seemed like the internet was believing she was going to be the character mainly because she's the most popular one in Japan, but also because she'd won. You remember when they did those like Arms Crash tournaments that they were kind of supposed to be like splat fests, where you would like. People would play as certain characters and whatever. She was the winner of multiple of those, I believe, which is why I think she was probably chosen. But then Sakurai said in the presentation that it was the producer of the game, or the director who said, yes, I would like it to be Min Min, so that's why. So basically, it was his
Sakurai
choice.
said he was interested in potentially doing Ninjara,
yeah, who's like the ninja type guy, which they gave him like a bonus costume as well, as part of the Mii Fighters stuff. But Min Min, what do you think of Min Min, Bally?
Before we start, can I just say how cool it is that they showed what video game console Sakurai owns, including...
Look, I love Sakurai doing presentations because he kind of gets away with whatever the hell he wants, and so he can show his like
PlayStation Pro just sitting there.
Massive fucking televisions, by the way, 2 huge TVs side by side with like every console known to man underneath them, and he then admits that he's like, yes, because I like watching TV when I play video games. I'm like, Sakurai, my man, like we're multitasking. I'm with you. It's exactly what I do. So I feel him.
And there's very like small. You can barely fit 2 people on that sofa, sort of.
Oh,
sofa.
tiny.
It was very minimalist living room. I was very impressed.
I mean, it kind of is in keeping with Japan, right? Like, they tend to keep things very tidy and very, like, immaculate. So I wasn't surprised to see that, especially when he's putting his house on a presentation. But, like, no trace of dust anywhere, just completely clean every measure. Just absolutely... it was fun to see inside Sakurai's home. So that was pretty cool.
But yeah, Min Min, I think she kind of reinvents a lot of the norms when you think about how you make a Smash character. So, for example, she doesn't seem to have like smash attacks. It's like you basically have these long range attacks where one button, normally your special button is like a smash attack, and your neutral regular button A is a regular attack, like a melee attack, whereas A in this case controls the right arm, I believe, and the B button, normally the special button controls the left arm. So you're just controlling these 2 arms and they're not special attacks or regular attacks. They're kind of like this halfway house, which I just think is really unusual, and you kind of just throw them out like an arms, obviously, like spring loaded.
Yeah, it's basically trying to replicate what the Joy-Cons do in ARMS, which is one arm, one is the other arm. So obviously the way Sakurai, I really love just the way he translates mechanics from games into Smash Brothers. He's literally just mapped it to like, okay, the 2 buttons will be the 2 arms, and like it makes sense. It's cool. It's different, and like you say that it's like adding new mechanics, but I think that's kind of the case with every new DLC character. They seem to add something unique that hasn't been done before in Smash Brothers, whether it be like Hero's crazy like mana usage with all his spells that you can do, or something else. Like he's definitely pushing the envelope when it comes to changing up the style of different things you can do with characters.
Yeah, and like the most recent, say, 10 characters are just infinitely more innovative than, back in, like, the closer we are to the present day, just the more innovative the characters are, like, generally.
Yes.
Like, it's just, if say a character like, I don't know, Captain Falcon or Ganondorf came into the game tomorrow, I think they'd have just a really reinvented moveset compared to the fairly standard movesets I guess they both have, because they've kind of inherited it through other games,
Basically, yeah. And that's one of the things that people discuss, like when there's going to be a new Smash Brothers game, are they able essentially to get rid of all these characters because they can justify it by being like, oh, Mario is completely different now, we've totally changed his moveset to something totally new, and just do it that way. Like that's a way for them to get away with it, but who knows. Future of Smash Brothers is so weird because we're just in this place where there's infinite characters and the game is ridiculously huge.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do.
I'd argue that you have a cut-off, and then you say everyone before the cut-off we're going to reinvent, everyone after can more or less remain the same and obviously a bit updated, I guess. But the debate is where would that cut-off be?
Totally. But I'm very excited to play as Min Min. Some other cool things she can do is, so similar to like Lucina, you can angle her attacks, with sword strikes. I think it's the side B with Martha and Lucina, you can angle it up, down, or center. There are a few characters that do that, but the arms can angle. And you can also change out your arm. So the down B is changing between like a really heavy, powerful arm, one that's faster and has like a wide range to it, but not as much damage. And then the dragon, which seems to be like the base damage arm, but also if you hold it down, it shoots out a laser beam at the end, which is pretty cool. So yeah, that stuff is cool. And then also one of the other things she does is she has some kicks. Her movement overall, it feels like my type of Smash Brothers character, which is like doing the dive kick, doing a slide, like those types of moves are the ones that I'm definitely in for. And she does like close-up melee kicks as well. But you can do an up tilt, which acts as a reflector. So if Samus shoots a salmon. Yeah, let's the new Smash Brothers character, a random salmon out of the sea. New Splatoon character. There must be a salmon character in Splatoon, right? Salmon Run, that's the thing.
Well, there's Salmon Run. Salmon Run is, I guess, the villains are the salmon, right? It's
sure.
Waves of salmon.
Hey man, we need those villains from Splatoon. Where's the giant octopus? He should be the next Smash character. Anyway, as I was saying, the up tilt acts as not really a counter, but like a projectile reflector, like Palutena's reflector, like Fox's and Falco's reflector, which is really cool. So it has that ability to it, and you can kind of utilize it as a defensive measure as well. So yeah, she's coming out on the 29th of June, so not too long to wait, about a week or so. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm definitely going to jump back into Smash Brothers.
Two things I'd point out from the sort of little bit of gameplay Sakurai did. One was that it just seems like you're constantly throwing out these arms. It looks incredibly spammy, but obviously there's a lot more to it than that. It just... Yeah. Because you don't have neutral moves or special moves, it's just this one type of move. It's more or less, that's what she is forced to constantly be doing in a way. It's almost like Olimar and throwing his Pikmin in a way. Like, that's his thing. And if you want to try, there's not really techniques you can do beyond his thing in the same way this is Min Min's thing. Right. And then the other thing I think I noticed, but correct me if you saw otherwise, was that part of the way in which Min Min is so vulnerable to close-up attacks is that when you withdraw your arm, so when they come back from having been extended, they don't seem to make any contact or do any damage on the way back. It only seems to be on the way out.
Yeah, it seems like on the way out, and then it has like a damage window. Like when she does the Ram one, which has a bit of a spinning arc to it, that one he said had like a certain amount of a window where it's out there where it does do damage. But yeah, you're right. When it comes back, it's not like a boomerang where it can hit you on the back end as well as the front end. It seems only on the front end it can actually do damage, which makes sense because they're slower coming back. Like there's no momentum behind them, so it makes sense for them to not really affect other characters. So.
I'd be interested if like pro players can utilize her spacing properly, or whether pro players will just kind of work her out very quickly and just be like, right, you have to get up close and beat her and you're gonna win, you know? Right.
Is it like a Little Mac situation? Because Sakurai says that she's much better on the ground than she is in the air. Although she does have decent recovery, right? Like she has the rope style recovery, which is a standard that we've come to see across this game with a lot of different characters. But she also has like a boost jump that you have to hold down, which I'm not the biggest fan of boost jumps, but to be honest, when she's off stage, I'm fine with it just being the rope version, because like Diddy Kong's the prime example where I suck as him, because when I'm off stage I try to do my up B and I'm like, oh no, I have to hold it down, don't I? And then you mess up. I mess up anyway because I always forget about it. But yeah, no, the other stuff that he showed quickly was like some Amiibo. There's a new Joker Amiibo, which looks amazing. Like
Amiibo just keep looking better and better, don't they?
Yeah, except for the hero one, I didn't think that looked as good.
No, they're quite detailed to me.
Yeah, his face, his faces on the hero wasn't that well done, I thought. But obviously they're still in production and trying to figure out what to do. But they also showed some Amiibo costumes. The one that I thought was hilarious was they do Tekken and a Heihachi. And like there's this famous thing from Tekken where Heihachi, like I think, throws someone in a volcano. And so they show him on the Wii Sports stage over the volcano, throwing another character into the volcano. So that was very funny.
They've done their homework.
They have. I mean, Sakurai always does. I guarantee you, every like shot of those Mii fighters is some sort of in-joke regarding that series or something to do with it.
Yeah.
Because that's what he loves to do. But also, I think the one that stood out to me was like Vault Boy from Fallout. Is now a Mii costume as well. Which he didn't mention any music coming alongside that, which is interesting because with characters like that, like Cuphead, you expect that as a thing now that they've been doing is like, here's at least one music track from the series. And the fact that Bethesda, I guess maybe Sakurai didn't ask for a music track. I don't know. It seems weird because it's a much more high-profile character as a Mii costume.
It's good to see Bethesda on board for something like that. You know, it's interesting.
Oh, totally.
They're the sort of company into those things and working with other companies, I guess.
I mean, let's be honest, Bally. If you were asked to have anything in Smash Brothers as a video game company, who's going to turn that down, right? Like, it's such an easy advertisement for your franchises and your games.
I think like Sony probably would, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so that would make more sense. But like, if we're talking
maybe
third parties or even Microsoft at this point, because they actually have a full-on character in the game.
I also think EA and Ubisoft are a bit inward-looking, perhaps, in comparison.
Well, you say that, but like there are Ezio costumes and Rabbids costumes. Ubisoft have done that stuff.
That is true. That is true.
EA for certain. Like, you're not going to get fucking Fate or whatever her name from Mirror's Edge or something like that.
Yeah,
as cool as that would be, right? That's not going to happen. So, anyway, I think that probably just wraps up the Sakurai presentation. So, any other last thoughts about it? I want him to present everything. He's
so we've got. Let me just check. We've got 5 more characters, or it's 4 more, including.
Yeah, we got 5 more. 5 more to come after this.
5 more to come after this, right? Okay, that's cool. It's awesome. I think this is a great announcement. I think Min Min looks cool, and now that we've had a Nintendo character, I'd imagine the next one probably won't be a Nintendo character, which is even more exciting. So we'll see.
You like to think, but we shall see. Things are.
There is no more rhyme and reason in Smash Brothers anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all open season, so excited to hear about that. But for now, let's get back to the show. And we're back. That was a great discussion we had about the ARMS Smash Brothers character. I was so surprised that it was actually Paper Mario from Origami King and not a regular ARMS character. But there you go.
I'm just happy they had that F-Zero game coming out, bonus announcement at the end. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was shocking, truly. Yeah. Just... But good news nonetheless. All right, let's close out the show. Bally, where can people go if they want to support us with their hard-earned cash? What can they do if they would like to do
They can support us on Patreon. We're hugely thankful to everyone who supports us on Patreon, but I want to shout out our $10 tier patrons. They are Atari Alex, Thomas, Matthew, and my fiancée Caroline. Thank you very much for your $10 tier support.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matthew, a recent $10 supporter.
Yeah,
appreciate that. And yeah, you can find us patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife. We can get a bunch of bonus episodes and fun stuff. And yeah, you can find us all over the place on the internet. Our Twitter account is @TNL Podcast, where you can see updates on what we're doing. You can also find our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ThisNintendoLife, which I don't think we talked about on the show, but we are now doing the YouTube version day and date with the actual podcast. So timestamps on everything, same day. So if you prefer the YouTube version, you now get it on the same day, on the Monday, which is good. Yeah. And yeah, we just something long overdue. We should have probably done a while ago.
A few people picked up on it in our survey, so thanks for pointing that out. And we thought, we can do that.
So here you are, feeling the effects of the survey and the things you told us already. So that's good to hear. And then you can obviously find us individually on Twitter. I'm @LordNBZ. I just started the final Wheel of Time book, Bally, and I tweet every time I tweet about Wheel of Time. You just use the hashtag Twitter of Time, and I get like 30 likes on a tweet without trying, because there's a big community of Wheel of Time fans on Twitter, and it just feels nice to get lots of likes on a tweet. So if I ever feel like
Great.
I need some likes, let's just talk about Wheel of Time and tag people. That's good.
So I just hashtag that hashtag and then just kind of tweet about something else and still get loads of likes. There we go.
Yeah, let's see what happens.
Get my hits up.
That'd be funny. Absolutely. Bally, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN 91.
You can find us on the internet with like Stitcher and Spotify and other places. And you can go review us on iTunes. That would be nice. That'd be good. Please review us on iTunes / Apple Podcasts, whatever the hell they call it these days. I don't know. They names are weird.
Been a while since we had a review, so we would hugely appreciate any reviews. If you haven't done so yet, we would absolutely
We'll read it out. We'll read it out.
And we'll read it
out.
out.
If it's a good one. Unless you give us 1 star and you're mean to us, then or maybe we will read it out on the show and just, I don't know, just internalize all the terrible things that you say about us because we're actually bad. No, please don't do that. Please just give us nice reviews. That'd be good. And I think that's pretty much it. Anything else? Oh, reminder, Backlog Club, Nintendogs plus Cats. Play along with us. Send your emails.
That classic 3DS launch game.
Absolutely. Send your emails to Bally, what email address, so that they can give us their thoughts on Nintendogs plus Cats, as everyone obviously plays along with us.
Please email ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We also have a Backlog Club thread on our Discord server. Link to that Discord server in the description, and on Twitter at TNL Podcast. You can find it there. It's a great community to hang out, chat online.
Cool. That's going to close things. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back in another couple of weeks with more chatter about Nintendo video games and the world. Until then, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, folks. The musical interludes used on today's show were Crash and Burn Again from Unravel 2, copyright Coldwood Interactive 2018, and the main theme from ARMS, copyright Nintendo 2017.